Kieran's pove. The door swung open before Sarah could spit whatever venom she'd brewed. She closed her eyes and muttered, "What now?" Like everyone, including me, was a fucking inconvenience. "Enter," I called out, hoping whoever it was would annoy her further. The door drew open, and Gavin, my beta, strode in, all military precision. His gaze swept over Lucian's hand clutching Sarah's, "Fuck," and landed on me like none of it mattered. "Alpha." He stretched out a thin brown envelope to me. "Here are the results of the investigation." Sarah's nails dug into the sheets. "Take your pack business elsewhere." I couldn't resist snapping back at her. "It is your business." She frowned. "What?" Ignoring her, I pulled out the single document in the envelope. Gavin narrated as my eyes skimmed the document. "We found the casing of the bullet that Serafina was shot with." I heard Sarah's breath hitch. "As you suspected, they had the same markings that we found on the bodies of the dead rogues after the attack." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked softly. I turned to her, and whatever compassion I felt for her evaporate the sight of Lucian still fucking holding her hand. Gavin looked at me, silently asking for permission, and I nodded. "It means that the rogues who attacked during your father's funeral are the ones who tried to kill you with the silver bullet." But that's impossible. Her whole body trembled, and I had to make a conscious effort not to race across the room and gather her in my arms. I haven't been a Lockwood in years. Her whispered words cut deeper than any blade. "You may not wear the Lockwood name now, Sarah." I tightened my jaw, "but you can never deny your blood. This makes no sense." She shook her head, refusing to accept it. "Are you sure you got it right?" Her gaze snapped to Gavin. "Even if they wanted a Lockwood, why target me? To the Lockwoods, I'm nobody." Silver casing, matching striations. Gavin's tone was clinical, no bullshit. Even if Sarah didn't know him well, everyone understood my beta didn't lie. This wasn't random. They were waiting for you. A fractured sound escaped her, half frustration, half fear. Every instinct in me howled to close the distance, drag her against my chest. But Lucian moved first. "I'll keep you safe, Sarah." His interruption made my fangs throb. "OTS has top-tier security, over my dead body." The growl tore from me before I could stop it. "The mother of my son remains under my protection." "Is that so?" Lucian's polished facade finally cracked, revealing something razor-edged. "Then explain why Sarah's lying in a hospital bed." Again. The accusation in his eyes lit a fire in my blood. Who the fuck did he think he was, judging me? The air crackled with the clash of two alphas, and with just one move, I would have lunged to rip out Lucian's throat. "Daniel!" Sarah's gasp shattered our standoff, slapping her hand over her mouth. Her gaze snapped to mine, and for the first time since I'd entered, her eyes held something other than icy disdain. Raw, primal fear. What if they go after him next? We have to protect him. For a brief second, our eyes locked and an understanding passed between us. We weren't exes or enemies, just two parents with one goal, protecting our pup. I swallowed hard, knowing what came next would shatter this fragile truce. "I've arranged for my parents to take him to..." My jaw snapped shut from divulging the location of my private island because Lucian was still in the room, and no matter how lax Sarah had let herself become with him, I didn't trust him one fucking bit. "What?" I suspected that if not for her injuries, that one word would have been roared at me. As it was, it came out as a raspy shudder that clawed at my instincts. I sighed. "It's for the best, Sarah. He'll be safe. You're not stealing my son." Her IV line trembled with her fury. Our divorce agreement was clear. "This isn't about custody." I barely restrained myself from slamming a fist into the wall. "It's about keeping him alive." Her eyes glowed with that stubborn fire I knew too well. "Then we'll protect him together. He's not leaving me." The monitor's frantic beeping underscored what we both knew. Neither of us would back down. Not when it came to our son. "And what if Daniel had been with you in the park?" I took a threatening step forward, my voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. "You survived because you're human, but our son? A single silver bullet." Sarah's breath hitched, her whimper slicing through me like claws. Every muscle in my body tensed to go to her, until Lucian's damned fingers brushed her cheek, catching that traitorous tear. My hands fisted so hard my claws pierced my palms. The coppery scent of my own blood mixed with the stench of my rage. "See, can I go with him?" Her broken whisper shattered what remained of my control. I forced myself to shake my head, each movement agony. If you are their main target, wherever you go, they will follow, and that puts Daniel in harm's way. A full-body tremor racked her frame. I didn't need the bond to feel her devastation. It pulsed in the air between us, thick as blood. Gods, how I wished with all my might that I could take the pain, all her pain, away. I should have been the one by her bedside, holding her hand. I was the only one who could understand the anguish of being separated from your child. Not some polished outsider who'd never spent nights aching for his child's scent. Least of all fucking Lucian Reed. Serafina's Pove. "Are you sure you don't need me to come in and help you?" Lucian asked. His fingers tightened on the steering wheel as he studied me. I shook my head as I unhooked my seatbelt, swallowing a wince when it pulled at the tender spot on my chest. "I appreciate everything you've done, Lucian, but I can take it from here." Over the past week, Lucian had become my second most frequent visitor, right after Kieran. Part of me wondered if his concern crossed professional boundaries, but after Kieran tried sneaking Celeste into my room again, I'd stopped caring about his murderous glares. At least with Lucian around, I didn't have the energy to fight with Kieran. But each passing day was a countdown to separation from my son, and I refused to spend one more second in that sterile hospital bed. He huffed. "Frankly, I don't think you should have been discharged yet." I cocked my head. "Remind me where you went to med school?" He rolled his eyes, his lips twitching slightly. "Ha ha!" I laughed. "I'll be fine." I reached for the door handle. "You of all people know I'm harder to break than I look." He smiled softly and squeezed my hand. "Yeah, you are." I squeezed. "I'll see you at training." "Not until you're 100%. Yeah. I got out of the car. As I walked up to my porch, I noticed a black vehicle idling at the end of the street. I didn't panic, though. I knew that it was a security detail, courtesy of Kieran. The car had followed Lucian and me from the hospital. I took in a deep breath as I stepped into the house, noting gratefully that my chest didn't hurt from it. I glanced at my phone, and my heart soared when I saw the time. Daniel would be back home soon. I'd missed my baby over the week I'd been in the hospital, and although Kieran assured me that he wasn't aware of my injury, I couldn't help but worry about him. I went upstairs for a shower and a quick nap. Sooner than I'd expected, the doorbell rang through the house, and I rushed down the stairs to open it. "Baby!" I gasped as Daniel threw himself at me, wrapping his arms around my waist. I bit back a gasp as the force of his head colliding with my chest sent a jolt of pain through me. He stiffened and immediately pulled away. "Oh, my baby," I whispered, cupping his face. "I missed you so much." His dark eyes roamed over my face, glancing pointedly at my chest. You lost weight," he said flatly. I chuckled. "The training trip was rigorous, hon." He raised a brow. In a moment he looked so much like his father. His searching gaze was so intense, I had to force back the urge to squirm. I waited for him to call bullshit. Although I was wearing a thick sweater that covered the bandages around my chest, Daniel was eerily perceptive, and I wouldn't put it past him to somehow know the number of stitches the doctors had used to close the surgical wound or the serial number of the gun that had shot me. But after another second of surveillance, he exhaled. "You need a home-cooked meal, then." I smiled, nodding. "I know, I'll get started on dinner right away." Daniel shook his head and stepped into the house, grabbing my hand as he pulled me along. "No," he declared. "I'm cooking for you." I let out a surprised laugh. "You are?" He nodded and helped me sit on the island in the kitchen. "Grandma taught me how to make egg-fried rice. Did she now?" He nodded, opening the fridge. My smile was so wide, my jaw hurt as I watched Daniel move through the kitchen. I offered helpful tips like, "Watch out for your fingers while you chop, hon," or "Add some oil to the rice so it doesn't boil over. That's enough salt, and you have to keep stirring or it'll burn." Each comment was met with an endearing sigh of exasperation that made me giggle. Finally, he turned to me, 2 heaping plates of fried rice in his hands. I slipped my phone out and took a picture. "Mom." Daniel whined as I giggled, staring at the picture. He came over to sit beside me, and I glanced at the huge mess he'd left behind. Dishes piled high in the sink, vegetable peels, scraps, and eggshells littered all over the counter, and winced. "Try it," He nudged the plate towards me. I lifted my fork and clinked it against his. The first bite was interesting. The rice was mushy, the veggies were overcooked, the egg was burnt, and he'd added way too much salt and not enough soy sauce. Still, it was the best thing I'd ever tasted. Daniel scrunched his face, glaring at the plate. "That is not how Grandma's fried rice tasted." I smiled, swallowing another mouthful. "It's delicious, Han." He rolled his eyes. "You don't have to coddle me. You can tell me the truth." His words resonated within me, and aside from the quality of his fried rice, I remembered another truth he needed to hear. I set my fork down and turned his stool so he was facing me, his legs tucked between mine. Speaking of truths, his eyes locked on mine expectantly, and a gnawing feeling stabbed at my chest. I had no idea how I would cope with Daniel being miles away from me. He was the only true love I had, and if he was gone... The loneliness that loomed ahead of me rendered me temporarily mute. "Mom?" Daniel placed a hand on mine, and I intertwined our fingers and squeezed. As much as being apart from him for a while would hurt, losing him forever would destroy me more than a silver bullet ever could. So I took a breath and forced a smile. "Here goes nothing." Serafina's Povey. "So, baby, the thing is it about my vacation?" I paused, blinking at Daniel. "What?" He shrugged. "I've been on break from school for a week now, and Dad said I was going to go on a longer one with Grandma and Grandpa." "Oh." The tension eased out of my body. I wasn't sure how I felt about Kieran beating me to break the news to Daniel, but I was relieved that I didn't have to do it myself when I didn't even know where to start. "And you're okay with that?" Daniel's shoulder lifted in that careless way only children could manage. "I was worried about missing school, but Dad said I'll have a private tutor so I won't be behind when I come back." Kieran had thought of everything. I suppose my feelings were shifting towards gratitude. Daniel raised our intertwined hands and pressed them to his chest. "Now that you're back from your training," his voice was suddenly small, his eyes wide and hopeful. "Will you come with me?" My throat closed. He rushed on before I could respond, words tumbling like waves. "Dad said it's a really cool private island and we can swim every day and learn to surf and barbecue on the beach and..." "Oh, sweetheart." I leaned forward and kissed his forehead, taking in a shaky breath. "You don't need to list all those things to make me go with you." "So," his voice was shaky with anticipation, "you'll come with?" I closed my eyes tightly and willed the tears brimming not to fall. "No," I choked out, "I can't." I pulled back in time to see his face fall. "Why?" My heart cracked at that one word, but I forced my voice steady, smoothing his wild curls. "I have to train harder, baby. To protect you." He sniffed. "But I'm the one who's supposed to protect you." The dam broke. I gathered him close, squeezing my tears back before they soaked into his hair. I made a smile as I held his face again. "I know, my love, but how amazing would it be if we could protect each other?" He managed a small smile, and I took it as a victory. Then he turned to his plate of fried rice and wrinkled his nose. "Can we order pizza instead?" The sun was just beginning to bleed gold over the horizon as I pulled up to the private terminal at Van Nuys Airport. The area hummed with quiet efficiency, staff and crew buzzing around Kieran's large private plane at the beginning of the private runway. Daniel stepped out of the car, shouldering his Spider-Man backpack as he stared up at the huge plane. "That's a Gulfstream G650, he said excitedly, turning to me as I retrieved his suitcase from the trunk. "Dad says when I'm old enough, I could learn to fly it." I smiled, smoothing his wild curls, my fingers lingering. "You'd make a dashing pilot." Tires crunched on asphalt. The silver Escalade rolled up beside my battered sedan like a predator circling prey. Kieran got down from the driver's side and immediately walked over to open the passenger door. I gritted my teeth as Celeste hopped out, tossing a perfect curl over her shoulder, half of her face shielded by oversized sunglasses. Leona and Christian alighted from the back seat, and a tightness spread in my chest. A man in a pilot's uniform walked across the tarmac to the car, and while Kieran only gave him a cursory nod, he engaged Leona and Christian in conversation, which left Kieran and Celeste free to head our way. "How's my boy doing?" Kieran crouched to receive Daniel's flying hug, his voice warm with pride. "Good," my son mumbled against his dad's shoulder. When they pulled apart, his eyes darted between me and Kieran. "Are you sure neither of you can come with me?" Kieran crouched down and whispered something in Daniel's ear. Daniel's face set, and he nodded once. "Got it." "That's my boy," Kieran said softly, and I wondered what he had said to Daniel. "Danny!" Celeste's saccharine voice set my teeth on edge as she swooped in, her manicured claws digging into my son's shoulders. Her hospital threat echoed in my mind. I'll take Daniel as my own, and it took every ounce of control not to shove her away and snarl at the catty bitch. Her smile stretched too wide. "Aren't you excited for your little adventure?" Daniel recoiled, his small body pressing back against me. I encircled him protectively, my arms a living shield. He glanced up at Kieran. "She's not coming with us, is she?" he asked coldly. A muscle ticked in Kieran's jaw as Celeste's ears reddened. "No, sweetheart," I answered, pressing my lips to his soft hair. My glare at Celeste could have melted steel. She definitely isn't. One more car drove in, Ethan's Mercedes, stopped nearby, disgorging more family members I couldn't bear to acknowledge. Look at us, I thought bitterly, one big happy family. The plane suddenly came alive, the engines humming in the stillness of the early morning. "It's time," Kieran said somberly. Illogical panic gripped me. Even though we packed his things together and spent all night watching his favorite shows and gorging on pizza and ice cream before finally falling asleep at 2 a.m., it felt like I hadn't had enough time with my baby. It seemed like Daniel felt the same because he turned to me, his beautiful dark eyes glassy with unshed tears. "Mom?" I crouched down, wrapping my arms around his waist as he threw his arms around my neck. "Oh, my baby," I breathed, trying to choke back the tears building at the back of my throat. "I'm going to miss you so much," he whispered. "Not as much as I'm going to miss you," I replied shakily. "I'll call you every day," I promised, "and remember to good for your grandparents? Listen to everything they tell you, okay?" Daniel nodded. Then he pulled back slightly and shrugged his backpack off. He zipped it open and pulled out something gray and fluffy. "Here," he handed it to me, and my eyes widened. It was his stuffed wolf, very accurately named Wolfie, that I'd given him for his 3rd birthday. For the last 6 years, Daniel hadn't gone anywhere without Wolfie. He pressed the stuffed animal into my hands. "Wolfie will stand guard over you till I come back," he said solemnly. "Shit," I whispered as I lost the battle with my tears, and they started pouring down my cheeks like rain. I pulled Daniel back to me, clutching him as tightly as I clutched Wolfie. "I don't have to go," he whispered, his voice shaky. "I could stay, Mom." What if there'd been a silver bullet for him, too? Kieran's words echoed in my head, and I sniffed, wiping away my tears with the back of my hand. "No, baby," I pulled away. "Don't worry about me, okay?" Daniel's brows knit, but I pressed a kiss to his forehead and squeezed him one last time, memorizing the feel of his little body against mine and his scent. Then I let him go. Kieran appeared beside us, a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Come on, bud. I'll show you all the cool things in the plane before takeoff." Daniel's face lit up a little, and he nodded. Kieran leaned forward, and our fingers brushed as he took Daniel's suitcase from me. Our eyes locked briefly, and something sizzled in the air between us that was gone as quickly as it had happened. I wrapped my arms around myself as I watched Kieran and Daniel move towards the air stairs of the jet, suddenly feeling cold. I jerked instinctively when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Leona and Christian smiling at me softly. I frowned in response, confused. "How are you feeling, dear?" Leona asked in a gentle voice that was completely out of character. This wasn't the woman who'd once told me I'd never be worthy of standing beside her son as Luna. "Yes," Christian added, "it must have been an awful experience." I took a cautious step backward, causing Christian's hand on my shoulder to drop. All their sudden concerns just reeked of performance. In 10 years, my ex-in-laws had never once offered me so much as a kind word. The only reason they tolerated my presence under their son's roof was that my defective womb somehow produced Daniel, the perfect heir. That was what I'd heard after my delivery. I wouldn't forget it. "Save the act," I said in a measured tone. "We all know I was never family to you, and now that the divorce is finalized, there's no more need to pretend." I didn't bother looking at them. My gaze snagged on the plane instead, on Daniel paused at the top of the boarding stairs, turning to wave at me. I waved back, forcing back a sob. Just take care of him, I said, turning back to Leona and Christian. If any harm comes to my baby. He's our family too, Leona said tightly, her expression an odd mix of indignation and guilt. Keep him safe. They exchanged a look. Christian sighed, and then they turned away from me, walking towards the plane. A minute after they boarded, Kieran came down the stairs and a slight whimper escaped me as the air stairs retracted. I tightened my arms around myself as Kieran walked towards me and stood by my side. They'll be flying non-stop to Nassau, then a quick switch to our private seaplane for the last hop to Musha Cay, he said, like he was reading today's headlines. I nodded once. The house is fortified, he continued. No outside contact with anyone but you and me. He'll be safer there than anywhere in California. I nodded again. After that, the only sound in the airfield was the increasing hum of the plane as it taxied and then took off, taking a part of my heart away with it. I stood there a while longer till the plane became a tiny speck across the dusty blue sky. Then I exhaled once and turned and walked right into my mom. "Oh, Sarah," she whispered, her arms outstretched like she was about to hug me. I took an instinctive step back and crashed into Kieran's chest. The contact was a shock to my system, and I sidestepped, putting distance between me and my so-called family, who were suddenly crowding me. "What?" I asked, my voice shaky. All I wanted now was to go home, crawl into Daniel's bed, and cry while clutching Wolfie to me. Her arms dropped to the side. "How are you?" "Fine," I answered curtly. Kieran took a hesitant step forward. "Can I drive you home?" I glanced at Celeste, noting the way she stiffened at his offer, and scoffed. "No, thanks." I moved around them, heading to my car. "Sarah," my mom called out softly, and I stiffened. "I'm glad you're okay," she said. I took a deep breath. I hadn't been okay in a long time, but what would my mother know about that? I opened the door and slid into my car without a word. The drive home seemed to last forever, blanketed with eerie silence, without Daniel fiddling with the radio and calling out every traffic sign he saw. Stepping into the house was worse. It's like the building knew that the light of my life was currently being taken thousands of miles away from me. I didn't even make it to Daniel's room. I slid down the front door and clutched Wolfie to me as the first of many, many sobs racked my body. Serafina's povie. Some might call it pathetic, a grown woman curled up in her child's bed, drowning in his scent like some lovesick omega. Fuck them. I spent the night in Daniel's room, burrowed in his blanket, inhaling his scent and trying not to dissolve into a messy puddle of tears. I'd gotten a clipped text from Leona when they landed at the private island. Due to the strict communication rules that served to keep Daniel safe, we couldn't schedule a call ahead, and I was informed that I'd hear from them when it was secure. Part of me thought they were going a bit overboard, but I was also grateful they were going overboard. Anything to protect my baby. I rolled out of bed, squinting against the morning sunlight streaming through the parted windows, and trudged to the bathroom, where I took a quick shower. I didn't want to go anywhere, but I had a follow-up appointment at the hospital, and the sooner I got the all clear, the quicker I could return to training and get strong enough to hold my own against the bastards who wanted me dead. I changed into a pair of jeans and a loose shirt and threw my hair up in a messy ponytail. I was hungry but felt too depressed to cook anything, so I grabbed an apple from the fridge. I bit into it as I opened the door and slammed right into Kieran's chest. "What the?" The apple slipped from my mouth and fell. "Shit!" He moved faster than was humanly possible and caught the apple in his hand. He held it up to me. "Here." I blinked up at him and made no move to take the apple from his hand. "What?" I paused, chewed the piece of fruit in my mouth, swallowed, then continued. "The hell are you doing here?" "You blocked me," he answered, his tone accusatory. I nodded. "Yeah, I did, because normal people stop calling after the 5th time of being ignored, but you." I frowned, my eyes taking him in from head to toe. He was wearing the same black jeans and navy t-shirt he'd been wearing yesterday at the airport. His hair was tousled, a little flat at the back, and his under-eyes were dark. I glanced behind him, and sure enough, his Escalade was parked beside my sedan. I frowned at Kieran. "Any answer other than no is fucking ridiculous, but did you sleep in your car, in front of my house?" He shrugged, taking a bite out of my apple. My eyes widened. Hey, I handed it to you. You didn't take it, he said, chewing nonchalantly. I huffed. I don't have time for this, Kieran. I have a doctor's appointment. I know. He nodded towards his car. Come on, I'll take you. My eyes blinked, struggling to process this bizarre reality. Had I woken up in some alternate universe? Since when did my estranged ex-husband give so much damn about me? First, the hospital vigil, then camping out in my driveway, and now this, playing chauffeur to my checkup. What the hell had gotten into him? We'd spent 10 years as strangers in a marriage, and he was barely tolerating my presence. Now suddenly he wanted to act like some model co-parent? Like all those years of icy resentment and deliberate indifference never happened? While Daniel was here, I might have cooperated for his sake. But with him away from home? I wasn't in the mood to play house. The last thing I needed was another deranged Celeste showing up at my doorstep, leaving me so rattled I'd make reckless choices that may cost my life. And the thought of being in an enclosed space with Kieran for any amount of time made my stomach churn with something that wasn't hunger. I shook my head. Stop offering me rides. I'm capable of driving myself. He frowned. Have you forgotten that there's a target on your back? I gave him a sarcastic smile and tapped my chest lightly. How could I? Besides, I pointed to the familiar black car parked opposite my house. Your security team has been watching me like a hawk. I don't need you to accompany me. He rolled his eyes. Sarah, if I wanted a hospital buddy, I'd call Lucian, okay? Kieran tensed, and I flinched when he squeezed the apple in his hand so tightly the poor thing crumpled to nothing, juice trailing down his arm and dripping to the floor. He tossed the carcass away and fixed his eyes on me, anger rippling off him in waves, anger and the sudden pressure in the air as his control snapped. Even without my wolf, I felt it, that primal alpha energy rolling off him in waves, thick enough to taste, anger, frustration, and something else that made my human instincts scream to either run or... I swallowed hard. Damn him. You're a dick, I muttered, brushing past him before my body could betray me further. At least he'd had the decency to nudge rather than command, though the effect was annoyingly similar. Pick that up, I said, towing the destroyed apple. It'll bring flies to my porch. I didn't look back at his expression. The old me, the meek, obedient wife, would never have spoken to him like that. But the woman I was now? She needed this small act of rebellion, needed to push back, if only to prove to myself that the traitorous flutter in my chest meant nothing. As I suspected, as soon as Kieran closed the door behind him, his spacious car suddenly felt like we were compressed into a tiny clown car, and the only air available to breathe was his own. The hospital was about a 20-minute drive from my house. Around minute 5, I commented, I thought you preferred the G-Wagon. Why have you been driving this one around? Kieran's jaw briefly clenched. It's getting cleaned. He glanced at me from the corner of his eye before continuing. Your blood stained the back seat. I nodded. Right. There was silence for one more minute before I said, thank you. Kieran looked at me properly then, surprise blanketing his features. I cleared my throat. The doctor said if I hadn't gotten to the hospital as soon as I did, I might not have lived, so... Thank you, he nodded. The rest of the drive was quiet and slightly less tense. The appointment went well. The cardiologist, whom I'd finally identified as Dr. Truman, carried out a series of basic checks, inspected the wound and removed my stitches, switched up my medication, and happily informed me that everything looked good and I was healing nicely. Kieran was leaning against the wall opposite the doctor's office when I walked out. His head was hung low, and I had to clear my throat twice before he jolted, obviously startled awake. I cocked my head. Why on earth did you sleep outside my house last night? He frowned, and I could have sworn his neck flushed red. You had me worried when you didn't pick up my calls. What does that have to do with... Sarah, I turned towards the sound of a voice, and my face lit up. Abby! She threw her arms around me, careful not to squeeze me tightly. Oh, it's so good to see you up and about, she gushed. I smiled. Thanks to you. Nurse Abigail had helped treat me when I'd first come to the hospital after the rogue attacks, and she'd been on night duty during my stay after getting shot. She always brought me banana pudding from the cafeteria, and when I couldn't sleep on most nights, she would stay up with me, discussing the most mundane things. Kieran hovered awkwardly while we caught up. Pain? Almost entirely gone. Aches? A little, but I've been doing those stretches you taught me. Sleep? I shrugged. Meh. She laughed and gave me one last hug. I have to go now, but it was so good seeing you, Sarah. I beamed. You too. She backed away, waving animatedly, and I laughed, mirroring her gesture. When she disappeared round the corner, I dropped my arms and turned to Kieran. The frown on his face had my smile slipping. What? He opened his mouth as if to answer, but immediately shut it. Nothing. Come on. I followed him back out. His head was on a swivel like he was looking out for potential threats, and I noticed he walked right next to me at a weird angle, like he fully intended to put his body between me and another bullet. The drive back home was silent, and when Kieran parked in front of my house, I wasted no time in unbuckling myself. Thank you, I mumbled. Sarah. I turned to him. Yes? He looked like he was warring with what he wanted to say, but finally he spoke. I don't get it. I felt like I would regret my question. Get what? You were so friendly with that nurse at the hospital. You're the most amazing mom to Daniel and Lucian. His jaw flexed. You treat him like he's a fucking rock star. I raised a brow. Your point? Why are you so mean to Celeste? I couldn't help the snort that escaped me. Why, there it was. That same tired refrain. What? Are we in kindergarten now? I met Kieran's gaze head on, wrapping my bitterness in layers of sarcasm. Celeste's dad wants to know why the mean girl in her class is yanking on her pigtails? Kieran's face tightened. It's not funny. No, it is. And you know what else is funny? What? The fact that I caught myself in time. I could tell Kieran everything, from Celeste showing up at my door and practically calling me a slut to threatening to take my son away from me while I was on fucking life support. But what would be the point? They never listened to me. Every damn time Celeste and I clashed, I was automatically the villain. Her words were gospel, her actions beyond reproach, while I, the pathetic, wolfless reject, was forever scheming to hurt their precious princess. No matter what I said, Kieran would only be on Celeste's side. He would never believe that she could be the bad guy, not the perfect love of his life. Forget it, I mumbled, opening the door. Tell her to stay out of my way, and I'll stay out of hers. Everyone's happy then. Wait, I groaned. What now? He rolled his eyes and reached into the back seat. His hand reappeared with a box. It's an encrypted phone for communicating with Daniel. The number is already there. If you use your phone, you run the risk of having Daniel's location traced. Oh, I reached out and took the phone. Thanks. He nodded. You have another appointment next week, right? I exhaled, clutching the phone box to me. Listen, Kieran, you don't need to do all this. Your security detail hot on my ass is enough. He shook his head. I promised Daniel that. Well, Daniel's not here, and he's the only thing that tethers us together anyway. Something like hurt flickered across his face. Sarah. I opened the door. You have Celeste now. We hurt her in the past. You don't want to hurt her anymore, do you? He frowned. Of course not, but then we agree. Bye, Kieran. Thanks for the ride. I shut the door before he could say anything else. This was how it had to be. We'd gotten divorced for a reason, and with Daniel gone, we had no other reason to be in each other's space. It was best for everyone if Kieran and I kept our distance, and if my chest ached at the thought, it was probably because I was still healing from the bullet wound. Serafina's povey. As soon as I closed the door behind me, I rushed to the couch and unboxed the phone Kieran had given me. Sure enough, there was one number saved in the contacts, and I initiated a FaceTime call, my hands shaking with anticipation. It rang twice, and a gasp tore out of me when Daniel's face filled the screen. Mom, oh my baby. I clutched my chest, feeling like my heart was going to break free of my rib cage to go to him. He gave me a toothy grin, showcasing his canines that were still growing out slowly after falling out a month ago. I didn't know if it was the ache of missing him, but he looked so young, and all I wanted to do was reach through the phone and hold him in my arms. I miss you, he declared. Oh, I miss you too, I said, forcing tears back down my throat. How's the island? I asked to distract myself. Daniel's eyes danced with glee. Oh, Mom, it's huge, I laughed. Yeah? You like it? He nodded. There are 2 pools in the house, and I can see the ocean from my window. Grandpa said when the tide is right, he'll show me how to catch a wave. I worried my lower lip between my teeth. Is that safe, though? he snorted. There's like 50 guards here, Mom. He rolled his eyes, flopping onto a bed, and they follow me everywhere. I can't get a snack without an escort. I laughed, refraining from telling him that security guards wouldn't be able to save him from a bad wave on the surfboard. Well, it's all for your own. Where's Dad? I blinked, caught off guard. What? He sat up, his eyebrows knitting together. At the airport, he promised me he wouldn't leave your side if I went. That must have been what Kieran whispered to Daniel at the airport. I fought the urge to roll my eyes. What was Kieran thinking, making that kind of promise to our son? Listen, sweetie, I started carefully. Your dad and I are... Is he going to make her his Luna? I froze. What? Is Dad going to marry Celeste and make her his Luna? Daniel repeated, his voice wobbling slightly. He only called her name, not with any title. I wasn't sure whether I should correct that manner. Celeste would join Kieran's life officially one day, and I didn't want my boy to be blamed for such a tiny thing. But back to the point. Daniel had inherited the worst of both Kieran's and my stubborn streaks. Once he dug his heels in, not even an alpha command could shake him loose. I took a deep breath. Where did you hear that, honey? Did someone say something to you? I swear, if Celeste had been running her mouth in front of my son, I see her and Dad together, he said, his voice losing its luster. And they're always hugging. Plus, I heard Grandma say she was tired of being Luna and couldn't wait to give it to someone else. My mouth dropped open, but no words came out. I was appalled that Kieran had been so careless in displaying his rekindled relationship with Celeste in front of Daniel, and that Leona had been so crass as to have him overhear that. Daniel sighed when I didn't speak. So I guess you and Dad aren't getting back together? I don't want Dad to marry her, Mom. I want you to get back together. I want you to be his Luna. I could feel the tears I'd struggled to keep at bay pushing against my blockades, and I knew the dam would burst any second. Han, I choked out. I forgot, I have to. Get to training. I'll call you back later, okay? He frowned. Mom? I love you, I said in a broken whisper before hanging up. I tossed the phone away from me and dropped my head into my hands. Funnily enough, the tears were suddenly nowhere to be found. It was like they'd dried up, leaving my insides arid, empty, desolate. For the first time since the divorce, I wondered if I'd made a mistake. I thought we'd gone through the whole process as amicably as possible, and Kieran and I had been civil with each other, at least in front of Daniel. The last thing I wanted was to hurt my son. But was that what we were doing? I mean, I wasn't the one who initiated it, but should I have fought harder? Should I have done more to keep my marriage intact? I scoffed at that thought. What more could I have done? Over the last decade, I'd done everything in my power to turn lemons into lemonade. As soon as we got married and I moved into Kieran's home, we'd slept in separate rooms. I'd tried to move into his room to foster some kind of intimacy, but I was shut down with a frigidity that made sure I never attempted that again. I tried to dress sexily around the house, hoping he could start to see me as less of a prison and more of a woman, but he never even looked my way. And on the nights when he needed physical gratification, he would come to my room, climb into bed with me, do what needed to be done, and leave. He never kissed me, never even fully took off my clothes, never spent the night. The sex was transactional, like a chore to tick off his list. And of course, he always used a condom. God forbid I had one more child to further tether him to me. But I got over the feeling of being used, and I figured if we couldn't be proper lovers, we could be good friends. But even that had been an exercise in futility. I cooked Kieran's favorite meals only to have them go bad because he ordered takeout instead. I tried to get involved in pack activities but was shut down at every turn. I even learned everything I could about Formula One racing so we could talk about it during the Grand Prix, but as soon as I entered the living room, he would stand up and go to his room to watch it there. No matter how much you water a dead plant, it won't miraculously come back to life. So I stopped trying. I retreated into myself, wrote my books, and lived in a silent hell for 10 years. But was my freedom worth it if my son was getting hurt in the process? I wasn't given a chance to answer myself because my doorbell rang at that moment, stopping me from wallowing further in my anguish. I sighed as I drew up from the couch and headed to the door. I really hoped it wasn't Kieran. I wasn't in the mood for any more. Oh, I blinked at Ethan. Hi, my brother exhaled. I straightened my spine. Can I help you? His jaw flexed, his entire body stiff and tense. Mom has been trying to reach you, he said flatly. You haven't responded, and she's worried. A sharp bark of laughter slipped out of me. How nice of her to finally worry about me after ignoring me for 10 years. His thick eyebrows furrowed. Sarah, she's your mother. A fact she's only remembering now. I chuckled dryly. If I'd known this is what it took, I would have gotten shot years ago. Ethan's eyes flared. Serafina? I rolled my eyes and stepped back from the door. Bye, Ethan. Before I could close it, he braced a large hand against it and pushed, leaving me no choice but to keep the door open. What the hell has gotten into you, Sarah? He asked, his voice hard, his blue eyes glacial. We're a family. Why have you been treating us like this? My eyes widened and an incredulous sound fell from my agape mouth. Why am I treating you like this? I stepped forward. Do you remember back at the hospital right after Dad died when you, my fucking brother, swore to rip away whatever scrap of happiness I clung to? His face drained of color. Sarah, I didn't. A bitter laugh tore from my throat. Turns out you succeeded. Daniel is my only happiness. I gritted my teeth. And now, because of the goddamn threat you brought to my doorstep, I had to send him away just to keep him safe. So tell me, Ethan, what's next? Sarah, I never meant. Save it, I said sharply, slapping away his hand that held the door open. It dropped to his side without a fight. You all should just continue doing what you've done for the last 10 years. I'm not your sister, Ethan, and I am not that woman's daughter. I have no intention of changing that. Not now, not ever. Sarah? Goodbye, I said firmly, and slammed the door in Ethan's face. For a moment, I stood in front of the door, unmoving. I didn't know why. Was I waiting for Ethan to knock again, off demanding to reconcile? After a full minute, I scoffed, wiping away a lone tear that had managed its way out of my eyes. It was one thing that he'd even visited my home, but expecting Ethan to fight for me? Not in a million years. And maybe that was for the best. Trying to reconcile with my family was like trying to make Kieran love me. Like watering a dead plant. Futile and useless. Kieran's Pove. The low rumble of the city and the sharp chorus of traffic drifted through the tall windows behind my desk, but today they carried no familiar comfort. The glowing skyline of downtown LA blurred into meaningless lights as my thoughts circled the same point again and again. Sarah. Papers spread before me on my desk, untouched. Architectural renderings, expansion blueprints, signed contracts, all things I should have been focused on. But every line and glossy print twisted into the curve of her frown, the cerulean blue of her eyes, the pale blonde of her hair, the bite behind her words, as I replayed every interaction we'd had since the divorce, dissecting each one over and over again. Sarah had always been meek and reclusive, and when Celeste came into the picture, I'd expected no less from her. What I didn't expect was this. Stranger who kicked people out of her hospital room and blocked my calls and dished out scathing remarks like they were going out of fashion. Worst of all was that she'd tactfully kept her distance. I guess it was foolish of me to expect anything less. After all, she'd spent the decade we were married like a snail, retreating deeper into her shell, even managing to keep me in the dark about her career. Sunset Ridge acquisition closed this morning. No press as usual. Our shell company did the buyout clean. Gavin sat across from me, reading out from his tablet. I nodded. Okay. He cleared his throat and continued. The zoning pushback you feared has been handled. Councilman Ortigo got his incentive as scheduled, disguised as a campaign donation. Another nod. Good. We've also purchased the unicorns you requested. They like their new habitat with the leprechauns at the end of the rainbow. Perfect. A loaded silence followed, and my mind backtracked for a second before I sighed. Ha ha! I deadpanned, folding my arms as I leaned back into my seat with an exhale. Gavin wasn't amused, though. His steely eyes were fixed on me like a mirror that refused to flatter. I sighed. What? He looked at me for a beat longer before he shook his head. Nothing. Shall we continue? I nodded. Sure. The Malibu compound's under. It's about time for her security shift change, right? A muscle ticked in Gavin's jaw as his hands dropped to his lap. You asked about her security this morning, he said flatly, and again, This afternoon, and again 30 minutes ago, and before that, every single day for the last week. What the fuck? How did I turn into this obsessive mother hen? I'd thought more about Sarah in the last couple of weeks than the entire decade of our marriage, and her presence in my mind was showing no signs of departing. "Indulge me," I said through clenched teeth. Gavin sighed, sliding a finger across his tablet. "We've got wolves posted at opposite corners of her perimeter at every point in time, rotating in 4-hour shifts," he said in a practiced drone, like he'd repeated this 1,000,000 times, which he kind of had. "We've got surveillance drones in the surrounding trees, motion sensors, noise scanners. One of the security teams has a human ex-Marine bonded to the pack. The others are elite pack members." He glanced up with a sigh. "Short of moving in with her, there's nothing more we or you can do to ensure her safety." I ran a hand through my hair, the tension in me not easing. "And you're certain there've been no breaches?" 100%. I exhaled, the leather of my seat creaking underneath me as I shifted my weight. 10 years, Gavin muttered, his tone thoughtful. My gaze jumped to his. "What? You and Serafina were married 10 years, and I have never seen you so unnerved when it came to her." My arms tightened. She didn't get shot in those 10 years. His gaze sharpened, like he could cut me open and inspect my insides. "And you're sure that's all it is?" Gavin's brows shot up, and his head tipped back to look at me, when instead of answering, I stood abruptly. "I need a drink," I declared. I needed to stop thinking about Sarah, and evidently I couldn't do that with my own willpower. Luna Noir pulsed with soft jazz, velvet walls muting the outside world, pulsing lights casting everything in a bruised red glow. Wolves lounged on curved leather banquettes, glasses in hand, their laughter feral and unfiltered. The bar gleamed like obsidian under candlelight, and like a sailor to the call of a siren, I moved towards it, drawn by the promise of momentary distraction. The distraction came quicker than I expected when Gavin and I climbed onto the bar stools next to Ethan. "I know why I'm here," I started, eyeing my ex, and most likely future brother-in-law. "Why are you?" Ethan chuckled, a dry, empty sound that contrasted with the liveliness in the bar. "How are things with Sarah?" he asked instead of answering. My chest tightened. Fuck. So much for a distraction. I signaled to the bartender. "Whiskey." "Neat." A minute later, a glass slid into my waiting hand. "Leave the bottle," I muttered. I downed the first glass in one gulp before filling it again. "Fine," I bit out. Ethan scoffed. "Paid her a visit about a week ago to check up on her." I winced. "And how did that go?" His hand tightened around his glass of scotch. "She hates me." Those 3 words sounded like they'd burned on their way out of his throat. "She doesn't." He shook his head. "You didn't see the look in her eyes. It was like ice," we said simultaneously. Ethan looked at me, his eyes heavy, and the smile I was going for came out as a grimace. "She's different," he said quietly. "The Sarah I knew used to be. Kind," I added. "Demure." He shook his head. "I don't know what changed." Gavin scoffed next to me, and both of us turned to him, brows raised in question. He didn't shrink under the weight of the stare of 2 alphas, shrugging instead. According to the law of elasticity, if a force greater than the elastic limit of an object is applied. He slipped a rubber band out of his pocket, hooked both thumbs at opposing edges, and with a sharp jerk of his hand, pulled so hard that it snapped. He raised a brow at both of us. "Call it the law of elasticity, call it self-preservation. Sarah reached her limit and snapped. Simple." I stared at Gavin in stunned silence, his words settling inside me like an anchor. Ethan let out a low hiss, and when I turned to him, his face was tight. "I called her a viper," he groaned. "I threatened her right after our father died. Fuck!" He buried his head in his hands, his whole body shuddering. Where would I start from? If I began to list all the altercations I'd committed towards Sarah over the last 10 years, we would be here forever. I'd neglected her, treated her as less than, pushed her away every time she attempted to get close. She'd always been reserved, quiet, but maybe I had snuffed out her voice, choked her with silence and contempt, and now... "There you 2 are." A sultry voice broke through the uneasy silence. I stiffened when a hand stroked my back, the scent of jasmine wrapping around me. The familiar comfort it should have brought eluded me, replaced instead by puzzling agitation. Celeste leaned over, her long golden curls brushing the granite of the countertop. "Hi, babe," she beamed, her hands stroking up my back to my neck. The urge to shrug her hands off me hit me, and I frowned to myself. What the fuck was wrong with me? This was Celeste, the woman I loved. Her touch was welcome. She pressed her body against my side and leaned in, her lips brushing the shell of my ear as she whispered, "I've missed you." My controls snapped, and just like in the hospital when she tried to kiss me, my reaction was completely instinctive. I was jerking back with a snarl before I could stop myself. My eyes widened, 3 simultaneous sharp inhales resonating around me. I could feel Gavin and Ethan's astonishment behind me, but my eyes were fixed on Celeste, on the way her face paled with shock and tightened with hurt. "Kieran?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Shit." I shot up from my stool and reached for Celeste, pulling her into my arms. I'm so sorry," I muttered, laying my head on her crown. She was rigid against me, her arms dangling by her side. Could she feel my heart thundering against her? Could she sense the mortification that consumed me? "I'm sorry," I choked out again. I gripped her shoulders and pulled away slightly so I could look her in the eyes. They were glassy, tears brimming in their depths, poised to spill over. Fuck! I'd sworn to myself that I wouldn't hurt Celeste when she came back to me, not after what had happened 10 years ago. What the fuck was wrong with me? "I'm sorry," I repeated. "I've had a long, shitty day, and I was on edge. I shouldn't have taken it out on you." The words felt like sandpaper in my mouth. I was on edge. I'd had a shitty day because I'd spent the entire fucking time thinking about my ex-wife. What the hell was happening to me? Celeste sniffed, furiously blinking. "It's okay." I shook my head. "No, it's not." I cupped her face, my thumb catching a tear that escaped. "Let me make it up to you." Her brows knit. "How?" I smiled. "You always wanted to visit the rooftop garden here, but you couldn't because we weren't old enough, remember?" She glanced towards the ceiling, and a faint smile ghosted her lips. "You promised to take me on my 21st birthday." But she was gone by then, because of what I'd done. I pushed that thought away and forced a smile as I slid my hand down her arm and intertwined our fingers. "I'll take you now." Her smile broadened. "Okay." I nodded towards Ethan and Gavin before leading Celeste out. The building that housed Luna Noir had 3 floors. The first 2 were the bar, the first floor for select humans, the second for werewolves. The third was a restaurant, and the roof was the moon garden. It was a hidden sanctuary, walled with moon-silvered herbs and night-blooming jasmine. Twinkling lights circled the perimeter, casting a soft glow over moongrass, rune-marked stones, and a central fire pit that glowed like molten gold. As we stepped through the glass hatch into the moon-kissed night, Celeste took a deep breath and her hand in mine tightened. "Oh, it's beautiful, Kieran," she breathed, but her voice sounded far away, muffled by the blood roaring in my ears as I glared at the fire pit, at the couple seated on the bench that curved around it. She was enveloped by a gigantic jacket that had to belong to him, and she was smiling at him, her fingers twirling around the stem of an evening primrose. For a second, I forgot everything and everyone. All my senses honed in on the 2 of them, and it was all I could do not to surge forward and rip him away from her, then rip him apart. "Sarah and Lucian, Seraphina's puff. Stop! Fuck!" I doubled over, bracing my hands on my knees as I struggled to breathe through the burning in my lungs. Someone must have connected a Bluetooth speaker to my heart because it was thundering so loudly that I barely heard when Lucian came to my side and said, "That's enough for today, Sarah." I shook my head, immediately regretting it as the training field tilted. "No, I swallowed against the dryness in my mouth. "I can keep going." "Lucian?" The sadistic bastard was gone, and Lucian, my friend, said in a gentle, patient voice, "You're done, Sarah." I straightened and winced when I felt a stitch in my side. "I haven't completed the course," I panted, resisting the urge to rub at the ache in my chest. I'd run the obstacle course at OTS 3 times before I got shot. Each time I finished drenched in sweat and mud with my palms scraped raw from climbing rocks. But I finished. Now, I'd collapsed halfway, feet planted in a muddy ravine as I tried to distinguish the ringing in my ears from the singing of the birds fleeting overhead, as if mocking my weakness. "I always finish," I whispered, staring longingly at the rest of the obstacles I had to overcome. I would probably die if I attempted to go on any further. Yeah, Lucian said, before you got shot by a silver bullet and had open heart surgery. But healing takes time, Sarah. He placed a comforting hand on my back, although it was drenched with sweat. You're not back to 100%, and that's okay. I huffed. Being wolfless sucks. Hey, he nudged me gently. That's what saved you, remember? Right, I exhaled, wiping sweat off my brow and accidentally smearing mud on my forehead in the process. I reminded myself to be grateful that my weakness had saved my life. Why don't you hit the showers and we'll go grab some dinner? Lucian suggested. My first instinct was to kindly refuse the offer, being in no mood to be out in public. But then I remembered that I was going home to an empty house and leftover takeout in the fridge. So I gave Lucian a tired smile. Sure. You're probably the first person I know who could wear a long face while in the moon garden. I blinked and pulled my gaze away from the evening primrose I'd picked and was fiddling with. The flames cast a warm glow on the side of Lucian's face as he smiled softly. What's it going to take to cheer you up? He asked. I exhaled, shaking my head. I'm sorry, you've been so sweet taking me out to dinner and then this. I waved my hands toward our surroundings. The serene beauty here was marvelous, but the stupid thing was that I couldn't even appreciate it. There's still something on your mind, Lucian noted. Is it Daniel? You miss him? My chest tightened. The admission tasted bitter. This was exactly why they'd sent Daniel away, because his mother was too damaged, too wolfless, too weak to protect him. We'd never been apart this long, not since the night he was born, when I'd counted each tiny finger through exhausted tears. Now every breath without him felt like drowning. Yes, the word tore from my throat. I miss him very much. The only thing that takes my mind off him is training. My fists clenched. If I could just become strong enough, fast enough, we can be together again. He nodded. I get that, but you can't rush these things, Sarah. You're already doing so well for what you've been through. He squeezed my hand. Progress isn't linear. There are highs and lows and twists and turns, but you'll get there, I know it. I cracked a genuine smile. Thank you, Lucian, for being by my side and for taking the time out to train me. Well, about that. What? I was going to make it a surprise, he shrugged, but I might as well tell you now. What? I pressed. I've assigned you a new trainer. My face fell. Oh, am I not meeting up to your standards? His eyes widened slightly. Oh, no, it's not like that. This trainer is an elite warrior, in many ways more skilled than I am. She'll guide you properly in your next phase of training. Oh, I said, intrigue replacing my despondency. Who is it? Well? His gaze shifted to something to the left and his face tightened. You have got to be kidding me, he muttered. I frowned, turning in the direction of his line of sight. What? I bit back a groan of frustration when I saw the pair at the entrance to the garden, Celeste and Kieran. I turned back to Lucian and forced a smile. We should get out of here. He nodded, taking my hand. Yes, let's. As we stood, Celeste's saccharine voice carried across the flowers. Oh, sister, we're interrupting something. I kept my mouth shut, a lesson I'd learned. Not rising to her bait, not giving her the satisfaction. Lucian's hand found the small of my back, warm and steady. Let's go, he murmured, guiding me past them. Excuse us, Lucian said, his tone bright and amicable. Kieran stood rigid as an oak, his eyes burning holes into the space where Lucian touched me. Just move out of the way, I thought. Just move out of the way and save us. Really, Sarah? Ah, fuck. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the interaction to come, and looked up. I shot Kieran a sardonic smile that only made the creases between his brows deepen. What now, Blackthorn? I asked. His nostrils flared like an enraged bull, finger jabbing toward Lucian with enough force to disturb the air between us. You blocked me, practically shut me out of your life, and now you're parading the city with him? I felt Lucian stiffen next to me. No matter how cordial he could be, he was still an alpha, and I was sure the disdain in Kieran's tone rubbed him the wrong way. I scoffed at Kieran. Excuse me if I'm confused. Would you rather I parade the city with you? Kieran's eyes widened indignantly, and he spluttered. That's not what Because I don't know why I have to keep reminding you that we're fucking divorced, Kieran Blackthorn. I don't know what's been going on with you lately, but this jealous ex routine is getting pathetic and frankly, tiring. Celeste's eyes flashed with barely concealed anger. Her manicured hand clutched Kieran's arm, and she lashed out. "Oh, please, Sarah. If anyone is chasing an ex, it's you." I scoffed. "Yeah, because I'm the one blowing up his phone and demanding to escort him everywhere, and I'm the one who can't keep my nose out of his business." Something shuddered in Celeste's face, and I pressed down that familiar guilt. I'd bowed out. I'd moved out of the way so they could finally be together. I wasn't going to let anyone make me the villain of their story ever again. Celeste's lips trembled with theatrical precision. "Kieran," she whimpered, pressing closer to his side. "I want to leave." I barely suppressed an eye roll. "Don't bother, we were just—" Kieran wrapped an arm around Celeste's slender waist and tucked her into his side. His voice turned glacial. "Let me make this clear, Serafina. The only part of your life that concerns me is Daniel. I tolerate your recklessness because my son—" "Yes," I snapped. "You've mentioned it quite enough times. You don't want Daniel growing up without a mother, I get it. But if you could, and I won't have you embarrassing him." I paused. "Excuse me?" He glanced at Lucian pointedly, his eyes hard with loathing, and said nothing. An incredulous laugh tore out of me. "Oh, that's fucking rich." I mimed, weighing an invisible object. "The hypocrisy is so thick I could sculpt it into a trophy for your next pack meeting." Kieran clenched his jaw, and I saw his free hand clenched into a fist, his knuckles bleaching white. I scoffed, grabbing Lucian's hand. "We're leaving. You two have a nice night." I pinned a glare on Kieran. "Stay the fuck away from me." I shouldered him out of the way and stomped off the roof, pulling Lucian along. To his credit, he let me drag him along as I angrily stomped to the elevator. I was still vibrating with anger when he turned on the car and merged onto the Hollywood freeway. "Sarah," he started hesitantly, "are you—" "The nerve of him," I snapped. "He parades around with my sister, confusing our son, flaunting their relationship, but I'm the embarrassment?" I dragged my hands down my face, resisting the urge to scream. Since when did Kieran become this shameless? Lucian rolled down the windows. "Scream if you need to." A faint smirk. "I wouldn't mind." I sighed, leaning my head slightly out of the window as the wind whipped tendrils of hair across my face, cooling my heated skin. "I'm sorry you got in the middle of all that," he shrugged. "Would you be mad if I said it was slightly entertaining?" I raised a brow, and he chuckled. His amusement was contagious, and I found myself smiling grudgingly, my anger gradually dissipating. I closed my eyes, letting the soft smile play on my lips. I didn't want to think about Kieran or Celeste. I hated how much headspace they'd already taken in my mind. I was determined to focus on the only things that mattered: my son, my career, and my training. Celeste and Kieran could very well jump off a skyscraper together, Kieran's pove. My shoulder still burned from where Sarah had brushed past me. The contact had been brief, but packed with enough tension that it sparked like a live wire. I stared at the exit long after she and Lucian had disappeared, a prickly electric sensation simmering beneath my skin. Anger, disbelief. Something else I wasn't ready to name. A quiet sigh broke my trance. I turned to Celeste. "I don't think I'm much in the mood for sightseeing anymore," she said. Her voice was calm, but something edged it, something I couldn't quite pin down. "Can we go?" I exhaled slowly, trying to expel the anger and unease lodged in my trachea. That moment with Sarah and Lucian had scraped open something jagged inside me, but Celeste was here, beside me. I needed to focus on that. I pulled her closer to me and pressed a kiss to her temple. "I'm so sorry." She shook her head gently. "I know it's not your fault." She wound her arms around my waist and gave me a small, hopeful smile. "Why don't we order takeout from the restaurant? Go back to your place? Just you and me. No surprises, no interruptions." More than anything, I wanted to be alone right now, but I swallowed down that feeling and smiled at Celeste. "That sounds perfect." Since she'd driven to the bar, Celeste and I drove separately back to my house. The drive back was short, but my thoughts ran far, looping in restless circles. It had been just over 3 weeks since the divorce, and 10 years of routine hadn't dissolved in 21 days. I still reached for habits that were no longer mine. Still paused at the door, expecting Daniel's thundering footsteps rushing to welcome me, Sarah's quiet "welcome home." I still half listened for the soft clink of her cooking in the kitchen, for the faint scent of cinnamon and clove wafting from a candle she'd always kept lit. But every time I walked into the house now, there was only empty silence. And tonight, when I stepped inside with Celeste's hand in mine, that silence echoed louder than ever. I tried to ignore it. This would be our home someday, mine and Celeste's. I had to start laying the foundation. She slipped her arms around my waist again, pressing her cheek to my chest. She murmured. Feels like I've barely had a moment with you since I got back. I kissed the top of her head, closing my eyes for a beat. I'm sorry. Things have just been chaotic. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. I needed to do better. I couldn't keep letting my past bleed into every moment of the present. Sarah was gone. Celeste was here. This was my second chance. I couldn't keep fumbling it. She tilted her face up, her expression warm and open. You can make it up to me now. This time, when she leaned up to kiss me, I steeled myself and let our lips meet. She tasted like strawberries and wine, sweet and soft. She pressed closer, wrapping her arms around my neck, her body molding to mine. I hesitated, just for a breath, and then kissed her back. I braced a hand on her waist, trying to lose myself in the warmth of her touch, the shape of her against me. But somewhere beneath the kiss, beneath the softness of her skin and the curve of her smile against my mouth, something inside me remained distant. A part of me that couldn't shake off that feeling of wrongness. Celeste was my home now, and I exhaled, pulling away. Her hands hung on my shoulders, blinking up at me in question. Key? I forced a smile through the hazy fog of emotions in my chest. I held up the bag of takeout. We should eat. She shook her head, took the box out of my hand, and set it on the console table in the foyer. I can't think about food right now, she whispered as she gripped my shirt and pulled me to her again. I tried. I really, really tried. I owed Celeste that. But when her hand slid under my shirt, warm against my skin, a shiver rocked through me. Her body pressed against me, soft and unfamiliar, and something inside me froze. I pulled back slowly and caught her wrists, gently stilling her. Celeste. She exhaled and looked at me, her expression already shifting. What now? I can't, I said, my voice barely held together. Not tonight. Her face fell, just slightly at first, a flicker of disbelief. Then something deeper. You can't. Hurt, quiet, raw, and rising fast, or you don't want to? No, what? It's not that. I scrambled for the right words to say, to fix the cracks I could sense opening between us. I'm not ready, Celeste. I don't want to pretend I am and hurt you more because of it. She looked at me for a long, tense minute and then let out a quiet scoff and took a step back. I felt the distance immediately, and I was appalled by my lack of will to close it. Tension lined Celeste's body. Her back was straight, her shoulders tight, but I could feel her composure slipping. You're not ready. She spelled out each word as if it were a code she was trying to decipher. Celeste, I've been alone for 10 years, she said suddenly, her voice flat. When I left, I thought it was the right thing, space, time, whatever. But it hurt like hell, Kieran, and I missed you so fucking much. I missed you too, I said. And I meant it. She let out a soft, bitter laugh. Yeah, I'm sure you spent the last 10 years pining after me while married to my sister. I took a step closer. Celeste, I did. You don't see it, do you? She whispered. You're acting like nothing's changed, like she still belongs in your life, like I'm the one who doesn't. It's not like that, I rushed to say, but the words felt thin in my mouth. She wiped her eyes with a quick swipe of her fingers, smudging her mascara. I thought coming back would mean something, that I'd still matter to you, that we could resume where we left off before, her. You do matter. She wrapped her arms around herself, and her voice was bitter with sarcasm when she said, Yeah, I feel pretty fucking important right now. Wait. I caught her wrist as she started walking away. Don't go, I said, the words catching in my throat. Please. She shook her head slowly, pulling her arm out of my grasp. Good night, Kieran, she said quietly, flatly. I wanted to fight harder, make her stay, but all I could do was stand there, paralyzed by guilt and confusion. And then she was gone. The door closed behind her with a quiet click, and the emptiness crowded me. I stood in the foyer for a long time, staring at the door, my hands clenched at my side. The silence around me felt louder than any argument, and Celeste's words seemed to bounce off the wall, an echo of pain. You're acting like nothing's changed, Like she still belongs in your life, like I'm the one who doesn't. Fuck, I swore, running a hand of frustration through my hair. Sarah didn't belong in my life, not anymore, and I couldn't understand why I couldn't let her go. Why was I still stubbornly holding on to a woman I never really wanted at the expense of the woman of my dreams? I'd hurt Celeste 10 years ago by what Sarah and I had done, and now I was hurting her again because I couldn't seem to fucking let go of Sarah. Celeste was all that mattered to me now, and I had to fix it before it was too late. So I forced my heavy legs to move and grabbed my keys. I was halfway to Ethan's house where Celeste was staying when my phone rang. Daniel's name lit up the screen like a tiny ray of sunshine piercing storm clouds. "Hey, champ," I greeted, forcing a light tone. "It's way past your bedtime. What are you doing up?" "Hi, Dad. I couldn't sleep, so I called Mom to talk to her, but I couldn't reach her." My grip on the wheel tightened, mirroring the force with which irrational anxiety gripped me. "I'm sure she just went to bed early, bud." "Well, okay, but she always answers my call. Can you check on her?" "Yeah," I nodded, forgetting he couldn't see me. "I'll take care of it. Good night, Danny." I hung up and immediately called Gavin. "Hey, what's up? I need a status report on Sarah," I said, trying to keep my tone even. Gavin sighed. "Kieran, this—" "I have no time for a lecture, Gavin," I snapped. There was a heavy sigh and a mumbled, "Gimme a minute." And then, "She's home. The last hourly report shows a male matching Lucian Reed's description entering the house with her. He hasn't exited since." A chill spread in my stomach as I pulled the car over to the side of the road. "How long ago?" I bit out. 52 minutes ago. Lucian. In her house. For an hour. Doors closed. Phones off. I sat in silence for a moment, the engine humming around me. All thoughts of reconciling with and apologizing to Celeste took a back seat. The longer I sat, the more insistent that prickly tension grew inside me. I couldn't stop picturing Lucian and Sarah behind closed doors, laughing, talking, doing God's know what else. I hated how my mind filled in the blanks with images I didn't want but couldn't escape. By the time I hit the gas again, I wasn't thinking anymore. I barely remembered the drive, just the blur of streetlights and a knot twisting in my chest tighter with every block. When I pulled up outside Sarah's house, Lucian's car wasn't in her driveway. But that new information did nothing to quell the volatile energy thrumming through my veins. I walked up to the door and slammed my fists against it insistently. A moment passed, then another, and then the door opened. Sarah stood there in a loose bathrobe, her hair damp like she'd just gotten out of the shower. Her skin glowed with a soft, dewy sheen, and a flush colored her cheeks. Her eyes, devastatingly beautiful, widened in surprise. I didn't see Lucian. But I didn't need to. My eyes took her in, the robe, the damp hair, the faint scent of lavender drifting out into the night air, and my brain came to its conclusion. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice low, rough, her brows pulled together. "What?" I stepped closer. "Where is Lucian?" I was going to tear him apart limb from limb. "Kieran, what the fuck?" But I couldn't answer Sarah. The jealousy, the frustration, it all swelled to a breaking point. My eyes swept over her again, and I hated how badly I wanted her, how much it wrecked me to imagine her with anyone else. Something in me snapped. I grabbed her by the waist, and this time she was too stunned to stop me from kissing her. Hard, Serafina's Povive. I lost focus, again. I knew it the second my foot slipped on a basic pivot, and the training stick flew out of my hands, landing uselessly on the other side of the room. In the training rooms around me, I could hear the others moving, grunting and groaning, probably doing a whole lot better than I was. Lucian had left me to train on my own today, promising to check in on me periodically. I was grateful for that because it was one thing to mess up while on my own, but a whole other thing to do it in front of an audience. This time, I couldn't even blame my distractedness on my injury. It was evident that my heart wasn't in training. My heart wasn't in anything. Not since the kiss. I could still feel it, sudden, heated, jarring. That wild, chaotic moment played on a loop in my head. The look in Kieran's eyes as he grabbed me, the strength of his grip, the heat of his lips. I was still as stunned as I was that night. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. I may not have kissed him back, but I didn't stop him. I didn't know what that meant. I tried my best to dissect it all. Why had he done it? Yeah, I knew he'd fought with Celeste, But that shouldn't have ended with him showing up on my front porch and turning my world over on its axis. It all felt so messy. You planning to actually train or just stand there with your head firmly shoved up the clouds? The sharp voice sliced clean through my thoughts like a blade. Startled, I turned. A woman I didn't recognize stood at the door I hadn't even heard open, arms crossed over a lean, toned frame. She had skin the color of caramel, dusty brown hair braided into cornrows, and dark brown eyes that slowly, calculatingly took me in. She watched me like a predator, trying to decide whether the prey was worth chasing. I fought the urge to squirm under her gaze. She arched a perfect brow and said, "If you're here to waste time, you're better off in front of a couch stuffing your face and watching sitcoms." No, I'm just thinking of a myriad of excuses, she interrupted, cold and flat, none of which will suffice. She waved an arm around and my gaze was drawn to her powerful bicep. She wasn't overly muscular, but I could see the strength rippling under her skin. "There's no place for laziness here. You might as well just leave." My cheeks burned. "I have been training." "I just wasn't." I started again, but she raised a hand. My mouth slammed shut. I didn't know what it was about her, but a quiet, simmering authority seeped out of her every pore, and I instantly knew that this was a woman whose bad side I never wanted to be on. She straightened from the wall, and my eyes tracked her as she walked across the room. Her steps were graceful, lithe, like a gazelle. She picked up the staff that had slipped from my hands. I barely had time to move when she tossed it at me, but I managed to catch it. "You've been training." It didn't sound like a question she wanted answered. "Prove it then." I raised a brow. "What? Fight me." My heart skipped a beat. "What?" She shrugged. "Or you can get the fuck out." My eyes widened. Where the hell was Lucian? I needed him to check in on me right fucking now. She crossed her arms and tapped her foot on the mat. "Well, if you want to stay, fight me. 3 minutes. You last, you can stay. If not," she shrugged. "Bye-bye." "Same goes if you don't fight at all." I blinked. "Are you serious?" Her body looked honed, like she'd spent a lifetime training. How was I supposed to hold my own against her? I hate repeating myself. She gestured to the open space between us. "Clock starts when you move." I had the urge to laugh at the incredulity of the situation. Part of me wanted to drop the staff and walk away, but another part of me chafed against the look in her eyes, the slight derision in her tone. I was tired of being treated like I didn't belong, by my own pack, by Kieran's pack, and now this complete stranger. I'd already had so much taken from me. My marriage, my son, my fucking peace of mind. I wasn't going to let OTS be taken from me too. So I moved, and instantly regretted it. She exploded forward with terrifying speed, and all I could do was throw my arms up and hope for the best. I swung the staff at her and winced when her boot connected with my hands, knocking it clean out of my hands, right back to where she had picked it up. Lucian would have clucked, shaken his head, and told me to go get it. She, however, did not stop. She didn't take a breath, didn't go easy, didn't hold back. Every strike she threw was calculated, clean, devastating. She was frighteningly fast, impossibly strong, terrifyingly skilled, everything I wasn't. I wasn't fighting a person, I was weathering a storm. And worst of all, she wasn't even trying. I lost count of how many times I hit the ground, nearly blacking out. Time lost all meaning, and my breaths came in desperate, ragged bursts. Every sparring tactic Lucian had drilled into my mind evaporated, and I went into survival mode. She never gave me a second to get on the offense. All I could do was dodge and block, letting her momentum work against her. Creating space when I could, little tricks, stalling, surviving, barely. Seconds dragged. My muscles screamed, my lungs burned, my head swam. Only sheer willpower, I didn't even know I had kept me standing. But I refused to give in. I wasn't weak or defenseless, and I would prove it if it was the last thing A shrill ringing pierced through the air, and she suddenly retreated. I dropped to one knee, chest heaving, blinking the nausea and dizziness away. She tapped her watch, silencing the timer, and folded her arms again. She wasn't panting or sweating, nothing to give away that she'd just handed my ass to me for 3 whole minutes. "Not bad," she said, not even a single fucking tremor in her voice. "Imagine what you could achieve if you focused." I looked up at her, dazed. For a split second, she was 2 people, and I had to blink to fix my vision. Who the fuck are you? She cracked a minuscule smile and leaned down, offering a hand to help me up. Maya Cartridge. I'll be your trainer for the next phase. This was the elite trainer Lucian had told me about. Was he trying to have me killed? I hesitated, then took her hand. You held your own longer than I expected, she noted, but you'll need to do better when you face an opponent that decides to use their werewolf abilities. My jaw dropped. You didn't? She snorted. I'm a beta's daughter. If I did, you'd be in two halves across the room right now. I stared at her in disbelief. How had she moved like that if she hadn't used her werewolf powers? Seriously? I asked. You didn't use powers? She shook her head. Not a single drop of it. You don't have to be a wolf to move like one. You just have to train like one. She spread her arms, gesturing to herself. And that's where I come in. Her words hit deep in me, breaking through the doubt and the feeling that I didn't belong. I didn't have to be a wolf to move like one. You've got potential, Maya continued, but if you want to make it, you'll have to let go of all your distractions. She tapped her temple. Silence that voice in your head telling you that you have to be something you're not to achieve greatness. Who you are now is enough to take you to who you need to be. She cocked her head. That better not be an excuse. I huffed a laugh, hopeful anticipation brewing inside. I understood now why Lucian had assigned Maya Cartridge to me. I could tell that she was exactly what I needed. I shook my head. No excuses. She nodded and extended a hand. I took it. Like the rest of her, her grip was firm, powerful. Get some rest, Sarah. We start bright and early tomorrow. I nodded. Thank you, Maya. She gave me a slow, devious smile. You won't be saying that when I have you on your knees, puking up your intestines. My mouth dropped open, and she threw her head back, laughing. See you, Sarah. She threw over her shoulder as she walked out of the room. Her voice held promise of torture and agony, but I knew that if I could brave through that, I would come out stronger than ever. I couldn't wait. Later, as I slipped into my car, eagerly anticipating going home and soaking in a hot lavender bath, my phone buzzed. I reached for it and frowned at the name on the screen. Michelle Brenner, Daniel's homeroom teacher. Did this have to do with Daniel's absence from school? Kieran assured me he'd sorted it all out. Hello? Good afternoon, Mrs. Blackthorne. I winced. I really needed to go about changing my name, or at least letting the people around me know I was divorced. I called to remind you about the parent-teacher conference this evening. I bit back a groan. I'd forgotten about Daniel's biannual PTC. I trust you and Mr. Blackthorne will be attending together as usual? My stomach turned. The kiss had momentarily left my headspace while I was trying not to die sparring with Maya, but now it returned with a vengeance, sharp and achingly vivid. I cleared my throat. Yes, I said, forcing the word out. We'll be there. If I didn't shoot myself in the head before then, Serafina's Povey. I stared down at the text I had sent Kieran this afternoon after Miss Brenner's phone call. Daniel's PTC at 6, and his reply, I know, I'll be there. I dreaded seeing him again after the kiss, a knot of unease and discomfort pulling at my stomach. I should have saved myself the mental energy. The parent-teacher conference was nearly over and Kieran still hadn't shown up. I kept glancing at the door, waiting, fucking praying he'd walk in at the last second, his usual scowl in place, ready with an apology. But the door stayed closed. His seat next to me remained empty. And every tick of the clock only made the hollow pit in my stomach grow deeper. I pulled out my phone again and called him for the 5th time. Straight to voicemail. No message, just that cold, empty beep. Miss Brenner had asked me for the 6th time if my husband was coming, and I'd told her, he's just running late, 5 more minutes, 6 times. I couldn't sit in that uncertainty any longer, so I called Gavin. If anyone knew where Kieran was, it'd be him. Hey, Gavin, I said, keeping my voice steady. Like the rest of Kieran's pack members, I didn't have much of a relationship with Gavin, but unlike the rest of them, he'd never shown hostility to me, at least not outwardly. Sorry to bother you. Do you know where Kieran is? There was a pause, just long enough to set me on edge. Yeah, he finally answered. He's out with Celeste. My heart dropped. Celeste. Of course. I took a deep, calming breath. Okay, thanks, Gavin, I said, forcing my voice to be steady. I ended the call and stuffed my phone back into my purse before I threw it across the room in frustration. Mrs. Blackthorne? I looked up and forced a smile when Miss Brenner smiled down at me and asked the same question for the 7th time. Can we expect Mr. Ross Blackthorne soon? She'd had her one-on-one with all the other parents and students in Daniel's class, and now it was just me and her in the classroom. I gave her an apologetic smile. I'm so sorry for keeping you waiting, but it turns out that I caught myself. Daniel's father won't be able to make it. Oh, I hope there's no problem. There was named Celeste. I shook my head. Oh no, he just got too caught up with work. Right. She nodded. So if she could sense my sour mood, she made no indication. Well, shall we begin? Yes, I took a deep breath. Let's. How is Daniel, by the way? She asked. The whole class misses him. He's doing well, thank you. He has a tutor who comes in every day, so he's up to date with his schoolwork. She nodded. Good. I have no doubt that he'll do well and will be up to speed by the time he returns. Do you have any idea when that might be? I pursed my lips. No. Soon, hopefully. Okay, then. Well, let's dive deeper, shall we? She looked through a file in her hand. Academically, Daniel is excelling. He's reading above grade level, his math skills are strong, and his writing shows real thought and creativity. My next smile was genuine. He's really a brilliant boy. He always pushes himself. She smiled. It shows. He's also extremely kind and demonstrates a great deal of emotional intelligence for his age. He always raises his hand, helps his classmates, and volunteers to lead group projects. He's respectful, empathetic, and very self-motivated. Pride swelled in my chest like a balloon and was immediately deflated by the fact that Kieran wasn't here to hear all the amazing things about our son. One thing, though, Miss Brenner added. Has Daniel been going through any changes lately? I stiffened slightly. What do you mean? Well, for the past few days before he left school, he seemed more withdrawn. Children are sensitive and are very attuned to their environment, and changes within that environment can affect them. Once again, I asked myself if getting divorced was the right thing to do, especially for Daniel. The thought of my baby being affected by Kieran's and my separation made my heart ache. I'll pay more attention to his well-being, I said thickly. Thanks for pointing it out. Miss Brenner smiled kindly. Of course. As you know, we usually have a segment where our students share their thoughts about the academic experience, and since Daniel's not physically here, could we video call him? My heart lit up with the usual happiness when I was about to see Daniel. Yes, of course. I pulled out the encrypted phone and video called Daniel. I set up the phone between us, and my heart skipped a beat when the screen lit up with his bright, expectant face. Mom? I beamed. Hi, baby. His gaze shifted, and he waved, his smile widening. Hi, Miss Brenner. Hello, dear. It's good to see you. Everyone misses you in class. I miss them. His gaze shifted to the space beside me, and his smile froze. Where's Dad? My heart cracked at the way his voice wavered. Sweetie. He had to work. He's really sorry he missed this. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. I didn't want to have to cover for Kieran like this. He should have shown up for his son. But my anger wasn't important right now. What was important was the way Daniel's face crumpled with confusion and hurt. He promised, he whispered, his voice shaking with too much fury for a 9-year-old. This morning, after breakfast, he promised he'd come. He said he wouldn't miss it for the world. I guess Celeste was more than the world. I reached for words, anything to patch the wounds I could already see forming. He didn't mean to break his promise. He just, I sighed. Things came up. But Daniel had already stopped listening. His chin trembled slightly before he looked away. He's a liar, he muttered, angrily swiping at his cheek. My heart completely broke at the tears spilling down his cheeks. Danny. He shook his head obstinately. I'll never forgive him. Honey, please don't be mad. Miss Brenner is telling me some amazing things about your schoolwork and... I don't care, he said. What's the point of working hard to make Dad proud if he won't even show up? I choked back a rogue sob. Oh, baby, I'm proud. He smiled softly, but it didn't reach his eyes. Thanks, Mom. Bye, Miss Brenner. Dan. The screen went blank. I sat back in the chair, numb and burning at the same time. I'd worried about how our divorce affected Daniel. Worried I'd inadvertently hurt my son. But it was Kieran who had initiated the break. He was the one who broke his promise to our son. He chose Celeste over Daniel. Mrs. Blackthorne. I gathered my things. Thank you, Miss Brenner. I think we're done for the night." Daniel's teacher sighed. "Children look up to their parents," and I shook my head, cutting her off. "I'm not the one who needs to hear that." I showed up. My steps faltered as I walked out of the school and saw him. Kieran. He was rushing toward me from the parking lot, looking disheveled, messy hair, wrinkled dress shirt. What the hell had he and Celeste been up to? His eyes widened when he saw me, an apology written all over his face. I huffed and forced my legs to move, intending to walk past him. But he caught my arm, turning me around to face him. "Sarah, wait, I'm sorry." I glared at him, fury rising like wildfire. "You're sorry?" He ran his hand through his hair, further mussing it up. I lost track of time. I was with Celeste and... I couldn't help it. I laughed. It was either that or scream in the parking lot of an elementary school. Of course you were with her. You weren't just late, Kieran. You chose not to be there. You chose her. "It wasn't like that," he said, face twisting in frustration. "I don't care what you meant," I snapped. "All that matters is what happened, and what happened is that you didn't show up for your son. There was an exhibit of projects. Daniel made the cutest birdhouse. His teacher sang his praises, and you weren't there. He worked himself to the bone to make you proud, and you couldn't even show up." Kieran looked like he wanted to argue, like he had 1,000 excuses just waiting to pour out, but I didn't give a fuck. "He cried," I continued, my voice sharper. "You promised him, and he trusted you. He believed in you, and now he's saying he never will again. Do you know what that means? What that does to a child?" Kieran stepped forward, his face set like stone. "It won't happen again." I stared at him, feeling like I was looking at a stranger. The Kieran I knew was honorable, a man of his word. This man, who kissed his ex while prancing around with her sister and then broke promises to his son. I didn't know him. You say that now, but what happens the next time Celeste calls? What happens when you two eventually get married and have a child? The words caused an inexplicable ache in my chest, but I shoved that feeling aside and focused on my anger. "How far will Daniel fall on your list, then?" His jaw clenched. "Don't say that." "I will, because it's the truth, and someone has to say it. You already made your choice, but I swear to you, Kieran..." I stabbed a finger in his chest, and his eyes darkened. "If you hurt Daniel like this again, I won't stay still. I will take him and we'll go, and you will never see him again." Kieran looked like I had dropped a flash grenade in front of him, and for once, he was silent, no comeback, because he knew I meant it. Daniel was the one thing in the world I didn't take lightly, and I would be damned if I let anybody, least of all Kieran and fucking Celeste, break my baby's heart. Kieran's povey. I didn't expect Daniel to shut me out so completely. 3 calls ignored, 12 texts left unread, each unanswered attempt carved deeper into my chest. I felt the distance like a physical ache. It was cold, sharp, brutal. I'd always believed myself a good father, present, devoted enough. But now I wasn't so sure. "He'll never trust you again." Sarah's words haunted me, razor-sharp and unforgiving, worse because they were true. I'd crushed a child's fragile faith beneath my boot like discarded trash. When my phone finally rang, Mother's voice held none of her usual warmth. "Your son cried himself to sleep, clutching that robot model he wanted to show you." I flinched. "You sound just like Sarah." "Good," she hissed. "That girl should have chewed your ear off for what you did. If I needed more proof that I had epically fucked up, that was it." My mother had spent a decade sharpening her contempt for Sarah. When even Sarah's greatest enemy took her side, I hadn't just failed as a father. I had become the very weakness I'd spent a lifetime despising, a coward behind his excuse. My excuse for letting my son down was flimsy at best, absolutely ridiculous at worst. I'd been out with Celeste, forgetting the responsibilities in my life like a teen lacking a fully developed frontal lobe. I'd been so desperate to mend what I'd broken between us, to prove I could still be the man she once wanted. So when she begged me to take her to Six Flags Magic Mountain, I went like an obedient mutt instead of the alpha I was supposed to be. When she snatched my phone and tucked it into her purse, no distractions, Kieran, just us. I didn't challenge her. And when I finally realized how late it was, when she pouted and asked me to drive her home first instead of rushing to Daniel's school, I fucking agreed. Sarah was right. I'd chosen Celeste over Daniel. I'd upgraded from shitty ex-husband to shitty father. I'd forgotten the one thing that should have been carved into my bones. My son. My brilliant, kind-hearted boy who still looked at me like I hung the moon, even when I didn't deserve an ounce of his faith. And I'd shattered him, made him cry. The self-loathing clung to me like the stench of blood after a hunt. After an eternity of my mother's scolding, "You're lucky he's even willing to speak to you," she finally relented, played mediator, convinced Daniel to give me one last chance. I clung to that opportunity like a drowning man clings to driftwood. Then the screen flickered to life, and the moment I saw his face, it felt like I'd taken a soccer ball to the chest. "Danny," I exhaled, running a hand over my face. He wouldn't look at me, his gaze fixed somewhere over my shoulder on the painting behind me, the one of the mountain range he'd always loved. High, flat, empty. My chest caved in. He used to light up when he saw me. Now I'd drained that light dry. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Bud, I'm so sorry. You have no idea how much—" Was it because of Celeste? His voice was sharp, too sharp for a 9-year-old. Ice flooded my veins. Had Sarah twisted his mind against me? Against Celeste? "Danny, whatever your mom told you." Mom didn't say anything. His glare finally snapped to mine. "She never does. But I saw it myself, yesterday, on the video call. That woman was sitting in our kitchen like she owned it. You were with her, right? That's why you didn't go to my school." My jaw worked soundlessly, a damned alpha rendered speechless by his own pup. There was no defense, no excuse that could dull the betrayal in his voice. "I don't like her, Dad." His gaze locked onto mine, eyes burning with conviction. "Daniel." I dragged a hand down my face. "If you just give her a chance." "No." He shook his head firmly. "I don't want her around us, around me." That stubborn set to his jaw, that was me. The same unyielding pride that had once made me challenge my father's orders. Except Daniel wasn't just stubborn, he was right. And I was the one who'd lost his way. "She's family," I rasped. "No." His voice dropped low, eerily mature. For a heartbeat, it felt like he was the alpha, and I was the pup being put in my place. But I was still his father. He needed to understand. "Listen to me, son." I forced steel into my voice. "Celeste and I are together. It's serious." A pause. Then the blow I'd hoped to deliver gently. "One day I'm going to marry her. She'll be your stepmother." His breath hitched. Guilt ripped through me. This wasn't how he should have found out. I'd wanted to ease him into it, let him adjust. Instead, I'd gutted him. Silence. Then, so quiet it shattered me. "What about Mom?" The question knocked the air from my lungs. I could still taste Sarah on my lips. I'd kissed her. Held her like she was still mine. But that was just another mistake. "Your mom and I are divorced, Bud. You could fix it." His voice cracked. "You could go back." Did I want? The truth was a living thing, clawing behind my ribs. I thought about her constantly, the scent of her skin, the way she'd gasped when I kissed her. "No." I clenched my fists. "We won't." "But why?" His small hands balled into fists. "Mom's awesome. Why don't you love her?" "I do. Not like how you do to Celeste." The way he said her name was a curse. I stared at him, struck dumb. Since when did my 9-year-old understand this better than I did? Mom always put us first, even you. Each syllable was a condemnation, peeling back the lies I'd told myself. Sarah had sacrificed everything, her pride, her happiness, her very breath, for this family. While I'd been blind to it. Worse, I'd expected it. Took it for granted. "Nobody can take her place." His voice cracked with a rawness. "She will never be my mom." The screen went black before I could respond. Silence, the kind that comes after a gunshot. I sat there, hollowed out, Daniel's accusations echoing in my skull. He was right. I treated Sarah like a discarded toy, something to be consumed and forgotten, the moment Celeste, my shiny new obsession, came back into my life. I never even considered the damage it would cause, the people I would hurt. A knock. Celeste slipped in before I could answer, her jasmine scent flooding the room. My muscles locked. "How'd it go?" She perched on my desk, all sympathy. "He hates me." The admission tasted like blood. Her pout was practiced. "Oh, Kieran, he's just a child." He looked at me like I was a stranger. Like I'd become one. She slid into my lap, fingers tracing my neck where the mating mark should be. I let my hands settle on her hips out of habit, but my skin prickled. Wrong. This was all wrong. "Is Daniel why we haven't—" Her breath was warm against my jaw. I stiffened. The truth? No. The reason lived in the way my pulse didn't stutter when she touched me, in how my wolf stayed dormant in her presence, in the dreams where another woman's eyes haunted me. But I couldn't say that. So I nodded. Celeste's lips brushed my cheek, a claim. I'll make him love me. We'll be perfect. Her certainty should have comforted me. Instead, my gut twisted. Because Daniel's hatred wasn't just childish resentment. My son was extremely intuitive, the kind that sensed rot beneath pretty surfaces. Maybe his fury was from something deeper. Serafina's pove. It was an enjoyable morning. The sun streamed through my kitchen window, and for the first time in months I felt light, hopeful. Every muscle screamed in protest as I measured flour, but the pain had become an old friend, one whose constant presence meant progress. I had started training with Maya, and if Lucian was a sadistic bastard, then she was the devil herself. You've got more in you, Sarah, she'd snarled yesterday, her boot, nudging my trembling thighs during yet another impossible drill. Dig deeper. And somehow I always made it. The memory of her rare praise still warmed me. Advanced techniques, real progress. Each bruise was a stepping stone toward becoming someone who could stand unshaken between Daniel and the world's cruelties. Today called for celebration. I turned up the radio, letting the upbeat pop song guide my movements as I danced between counter and bowl, flour dusting my arms like battle scars. The sweet scent of vanilla filled the air. The doorbell screamed through the house, one endless electronic wail. My good mood wavered as the shrill noise continued, over and over, like whoever was pressing it had gone into an electric shock and had their finger locked on the doorbell. Judging by my track record of visitors and the aggressive way my doorbell was being abused, there were only a couple of guesses who could be on the other side. I wiped my hands on my apron, already bracing for impact. The door swung open to reveal Celeste, her designer sunglasses perched atop her perfectly styled golden waves. Of course. Before I could speak, she shoved past me, her shoulder knocking mine with deliberate force. I didn't turn around right away. I stared at the empty driveway, my eyes fixed on a sprinkler in the yard of the house across the street. Give me strength, I silently prayed to every deity in existence. I finally turned. Celeste looked gorgeous as always, her golden hair curled around her face like a halo, ironic because she was the furthest thing from an angel. And right now she looked like a serpent, poised to strike. Stay away from Kieran, she snapped like some bitter queen issuing a decree. I dramatically turned, my head swiveling like I was looking for something. Do you see me with Kieran? I asked, desperately holding on to the earlier bliss I could already feel slipping away. Don't play coy with me, she hissed, taking a threatening step toward me. I know what you're doing. I see through all your little tricks. What's next? Are you going to plan another attack to catch his attention? I closed my eyes and breathed through my nose deeply. 1 breath, 2, 3. When I opened my eyes, she was still standing before me and hadn't burned to ashes like I'd desperately hoped. I'm not doing this again with you, Celeste, I said, crossing my arms. She scoffed. Tough shit. Because I'm doing it with you, how are you going to do it this time? Another gunshot is too obvious. Maybe an ambush? Home invaders? She stepped even closer, stabbing a manicured finger at my chest. Share with the class, Sarah. What conniving ways are you going to use to make sure no one suspects you this time? A sharp, angry burst of laughter escaped me as I swatted her hand away. Are you serious right now? I asked. If anyone should be the suspect in that attack, it's you. I narrowed my eyes at her. You had the motive, and I wouldn't put it past you. Anything to secure your precious Kieran. Celeste sneered. Like I would waste my time on you. You're not worth the effort. I spread my arms, gesturing around the foyer. Yet, you're here, having yet another bitch fit. I cocked my head to the side. How bored are you that you've penciled incessantly harass Sarah even though she's blissfully minding her own business into your calendar? Celeste's entire body vibrated with rage. You smug bitch, she hissed. You think you're clever? It's not enough that you're a fucking obstacle. You had to go and drag Daniel into this? The mention of my son immediately set me on edge. Excuse me? Celeste noticed my change in demeanor and her glossed lips curled like she'd just played her winning card. You heard me. That brat of yours has been nothing but trouble since I returned. She took a step closer. One more outburst, one more refusal to accept me, and I'll make sure Kieran ships him off to some remote boarding school in Switzerland. The world narrowed to the pulse pounding in my ears. "Let's see you manipulate situations when your precious Daniel is 6 time zones away," she purred, close enough now that I could see the flecks of gold in her cold blue eyes. No more video calls, no more parent meetings, just silence. Something inside me snapped. The slap cracked through the room like a gunshot, my palm connecting with her cheek with enough force to snap her head to the side. Celeste staggered back, her manicured hands flying to her face in shock. For a heartbeat, there was perfect stillness. Then, "If you ever," I snarled, surging forward to grip her throat, "so much as whisper my son's name again, I will end you." My voice shook with barely contained fury. "Not a threat, Celeste. A promise." Her fingers fluttered weakly against my wrist. For the first time since barging into my home, genuine fear flickered across her face. "Now get the fuck out." I shoved her back hard enough to make her stumble, "before I decide to give you matching cheeks." The hatred in her eyes burned like acid, mirroring the fury I knew shone in mine. "You'll regret this," she croaked, rubbing her throat, though the venom in her voice remained. A bitter laugh tore from my throat. "The only thing I regret is ever believing you had a shred of decency." The door slammed behind her with enough force to make the framed photos on my walls shudder. One of Daniel and me at the beach last summer tilted dangerously before righting itself. Silence. The kind that rings louder than any scream. My pulse roared in my ears, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. The sting in my palm should have felt satisfying. Justice for her vile threats, but it only left me feeling empty. Each encounter with Celeste since her return had been worse than the last. A disturbing escalation from petty jabs to outright warfare, and now she'd crossed the one line I'd never allowed anyone to cross, threatening to harm my son. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Kieran chose this. He chose her. Either he was willfully blind to the monster she'd become, or worse, he simply didn't care. My good mood had dissipated, and I abandoned my baking project, instead grabbing a tub of ice cream and curling up in front of the couch. I hoped mindless TV and sugar would take my mind off the altercation with Celeste, but half an hour later, my door burst open and I knew that was a pipe dream. Kieran stormed into the living room like a thundercloud, and I fought the urge to scream. Why wouldn't these two just leave me alone? "You struck her?" His voice was dangerously quiet, the kind of calm that comes before a hurricane. I set the melting carton aside with deliberate slowness, pausing Chandler's sarcastic quip mid-sentence. "Going to ask for my side?" I kept my voice level, though my fingers dug into the couch cushions. His lip curled. "I know exactly what happened. Celeste came to you in good faith, seeking advice about Daniel." A bark of laughter escaped me. "Seeking advice? Is that what we're calling threats now?" "Enough." His roar shook the windows. "Just admit the truth. You can't stand the thought of her being his stepmother." I couldn't believe my ears. The ice cream in my stomach curdled into acid. "Marry her if you fucking want," I hissed. "But if you or that bitch lay one finger on my son..." My voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "I will burn your entire world down, Kieran." He scoffed, advancing like a predator cornering prey. "You still don't understand. You have no say. Because you..." His lips twisted. "You never mattered." My breath hitched, his words landing like a blow. "You never did. Not when we got married. Not when we lived together." His gaze flicked to my lips, darkening. "Not even when we fucked. You were a mistake, Sarah." Venom dripped from every syllable. "If you hadn't slithered into my room that night, if you hadn't trapped me, Celeste would be Daniel's mother, as she should have been." I searched his eyes desperately, for remorse, for the man I'd loved, found only a void. "It's always been Celeste. Every time I touched you, I closed my eyes and pretended you were her. You were just... convenient." My palm cracked across his face before he finished, sending his face to the left. If I owned my wolf, his throat would have been torn out. "You don't get to rewrite history," I rasped, hands shaking. "Not like this." Kieran's head snapped back, but his expression hardened into something inhuman. "Don't I?" A cruel smirk. "You played the whore to get this marriage, flaunted our sex life in Celeste's face. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences?" My palm cracked across his other cheek, the impact vibrating up my arm. The sting in my hand was nothing compared to the agony shredding my chest. Hot tears threatened, but I clenched my jaw. I'd be damned if I let him see me break. Out! The word tore from my throat like shrapnel. Now. Something flickered in his expression. Too little, too late. With strength I didn't know I had, I shoved him toward the door. Listen well, Kieran Blackthorn. My voice was steel wrapped in shattered glass. My only regret is ever loving you. That night with you, I'd have rather fucked a stranger. The door slammed on his stunned face. When I was finally alone in the room, I unraveled. I collapsed onto the carpet, banging my left knee on the coffee table on the way down. The pain that exploded was nothing compared to the agony piercing my heart. Sobs ripped through me like bullets from a machine gun. Rapid fire, loud, ugly. I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to drown out Kieran's words, but it was like applying a tourniquet to an arm after the poison had already reached the heart. Why? Every time I clawed my way forward, every time I tried to move on, they ripped me open again. Serafina's Pove. The training room clock had long since blurred into meaningless numbers. Hours? Minutes? Time didn't matter. Only the burn in my muscles, the raw ache of my knuckles, the way my lungs screamed for air but got none. Each jab carried Celeste's sneer, "You're not worth the effort." Every hook bore Kieran's venom. "You never mattered." I hit harder, faster, letting the pain overwrite them like a virus corrupting old files. If I stopped, even for a second, I'd hear them. I'd feel the stabbing agony of their words. I couldn't afford that. If I let the words sink in, they would take root, grow branches, vines, wrap around me and choke me from within. Damn, what did that poor dummy ever do to you? I startled, whipping around to find Maya by the door, just like she'd been the first day we met. I was panting so hard I couldn't answer her, and that split second of distraction brought the venom back. "You were a mistake, Sarah." I spun back around and continued to attack the sparring dummy. It didn't have a face, but Celeste's and Kieran's kept flashing on the blank canvas, and I hit even harder. I didn't know when Maya moved, but the next thing I knew, she had a firm grip on my wrist, pausing my swing. "You're going to break your wrists if you keep going like that," she said. "And you'll burn out." For a moment, I just stood there, fighting to catch my breath, debating whether struggling against her when I knew I was going to lose was worth it. Finally, I staggered back, and Maya released me as I slumped down to the mat. She sank, too, with a lot more grace than I could ever muster. She wordlessly handed me a water bottle. The sound of me greedily chugging the contents of the bottle filled the room, and when I was done, I felt slightly better. Every time I touched you, I pretended you were her. I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to scream, anything to drown out the fucking noise. Come on. I looked up to see that Maya was standing again. She had a hand stretched out to me. "We're getting a drink." I shook my head. "I'm not in the mood." She crouched, her brown eyes pinning me. "When your trainer tells you to do something, what is your reply?" I rolled my eyes, remembering the first rule she drilled into me during our first session. "Maya, this isn't." "What is your reply?" I sighed. "Yes, Miss Cartridge." Her lips twitched, and she held her hand out. "Let's go." "I smell," I complained weakly. She wrinkled her nose like she'd just noticed. "You're right, you do." She wiggled her hand impatiently, and I finally took it, letting her pull me to my feet. We sat outside on the patio behind the OTS dorms. Maya procured a fancy bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon, which we sipped from plastic cups from the cafeteria, watching the sky deepen into dusk as a cool breeze brushed against our skin. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was actually kind of nice. Until Maya broke it. "So, want to tell me why you're attempting to murder yourself and a sparring dummy on your day off?" I exhaled, staring down into my cup. I twirled it slightly in my hand, watching the liquid slosh around. "It's a long story," I said softly. She leaned back, folding her arms. "Then you're lucky I'm a good listener." I shook my head. "I don't." "Your trainer just told you to do something, Sarah." I looked up at her. Though she had on her usual stern countenance, her eyes held a softness I'd never seen before. "Yes, Miss Cartridge." The words tumbled out of me, halting at first, then fast and uncontrollable. I told her everything, the mistake I made 10 years ago, the night I let my guard down, lost my inhibitions, and committed an irreversible mistake. The punishment that came after, how my family shunned me, how I was branded a disgrace, how I spent the last 10 years, alone, unloved, worthless. I told her about Celeste's return, about how I'd somehow remained the villain in their story even after the divorce. I didn't dare look at her when I finished. I didn't know Maya all that well, but she struck me as a disciplined person. Someone upright, who valued honesty and hated weakness. I expected her to flinch, to withdraw, to look at me with the same disdain I'd received my whole life, but she didn't. She just let out a soft sigh and said, "You've been through hell." I blinked, my gaze darting to her. "Of course you've made mistakes, Sarah. Who hasn't?" she continued. "But being wolfless? That wasn't your fault. And that one night? Last I checked, it takes at least 2 people to have sex, and unless you're Mary, you didn't make Daniel all by yourself." I huffed a weak laugh at that. Maya placed a hand on my shoulder and squeezed. "I'm sorry you were let down. I'm sorry you're hurting." I opened my mouth, but no words came. I hadn't been expecting this level of sympathy, and I didn't know what to do with it. There was pressure building in my eyes, and I was horrified that I might cry in front of Maya. "I just wish Lucian and I had met you sooner," she said softly. "If you'd been brought into OTS back then, maybe you wouldn't have had to endure all that alone." Yep, I was going to cry. Maya once again surprised me by pulling me into her arms. She held me as I wept, and I clung to her like a lifeline. The tears flowed out of me unabated, but instead of my heartache growing, it felt like the pain was ebbing, like the tears were washing it all away. Suddenly, I felt less pathetic, less broken. Understood. Maya's words replaced Celeste's and Kieran's. Everyone made mistakes, but the punishment I'd suffered had far outweighed the crime, and I was done serving it. I was done letting Kieran and Celeste poison my life with their toxicity. I woke up the next morning with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. It felt like the weight of guilt and regret I'd carried around for 10 years had been lifted. I felt lighter, an actual spring in my step. It was time to move forward, for me and for Daniel. Training was better. I felt less inclined to decapitate the innocent sparring dummy, and I think my tears had softened Maya because she went easier on me than usual. Not that I was complaining. Still, Maya's version of easy had me collapsing to the floor when we were done, struggling to breathe. My vision swam as she waved something in my field of vision. I frowned, grabbing the flyer. "What's this?" "A trial for all OTS trainees," she said. "It's in 3 months. It's a critical test to evaluate your progress." I sat up. "And you want me to participate?" She nodded. "Lucian thinks so too." But my mouth was suddenly dry. The other trainees had been training longer than I had. Most of them had wolves, which was a given advantage. Maya nudged my knee with her boot. "Get out of that head! If I didn't think you'd be ready in 3 months, I wouldn't ask you to do it." She cocked her head. "But I am asking you to do it." A small smile spread on my face. If Maya and Lucian thought I could do it, then I probably could. It struck me that I had more people in my corner than I initially thought. Lucian, Maya, Daniel. Daniel! Oh, he'd be so proud of me if I did well. That cemented my decision, and I looked up at Maya. Yes, Miss Cartridge." She returned my smile and tilted her head towards the door. "Now go hit the showers." I pushed myself to my feet and headed out. I frowned when I saw that the light in the hallway was off. I felt my way to the common area I had to pass to get to the locker rooms. Just as I stepped in, the lights clicked on, momentarily blinding me with their sudden intensity. "Happy birthday, Sarah!" I staggered backward, stunned, taking in the room. Confetti, balloons, streamers, an actual banner with my name on it. Some of the trainees were grinning like idiots. Lucian was holding a cake, and Maya appeared from behind me, throwing her arm around my shoulder. "Happy birthday, Sarah." She beamed at me. I blinked slowly, my heart clenching in my chest. I rarely celebrated my birthday. My birth nearly killed my mother, and my father never let me forget that. He'd scowl every year when the date came around and saw any form of celebration as a personal affront. And after I got married, well, let's just say birthdays were the last thing on anyone's mind. Only Daniel ever remembered. So when my phone buzzed earlier today with a birthday greeting, I thought it was from Daniel. However, when I checked, it wasn't. It was from Kieran. "Happy birthday. Hope you're well." I stared at the message for a long moment, strangely numb. Then I locked the screen without replying, and now I pushed that thought out of my mind, determined not to let Kieran pop the balloon of happiness swelling inside me. For once I was surrounded by people who actually cared. People who chose me, not out of obligation, but out of respect. And this year, for the first time in a long, long time, I felt like there was actually something worth celebrating. I was someone worth celebrating. Kieran's Vive. I stared at the read receipt, wondering why the hell I had sent the message in the first place. I knew there would be no typing bubbles, no reply. Why would there be? Did I really expect a birthday greeting and those 3 meaningless words, "Hope you're well," to fix it all? After what I said to her, after what I did, how could that ever be enough? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Not the hardened Sarah who'd pushed me away these past months, not the defiant woman who'd looked at me with ice in her gaze. No, that day she looked wrecked, shattered in a way I had never seen before, not even when I asked for a divorce or when we had to send Daniel away. And it had been my doing. Celeste's reddened cheek, her tear-streaked story. They'd ignited a rage so blinding I hadn't stopped to question. Hadn't considered that there might be another side. I'd stormed into Sarah's home and, God, I'd unleashed. Every cruel word was a weapon wielded for Celeste's sake. I deserved that second slap. Deserved far worse. But nothing had prepared me for the pain in Sarah's eyes. It truly cut. The way each word had trembled as she fought to keep herself together. The way she'd said she'd rather have been with any strangers that night instead of me. The door slamming in my face had been the wake-up call I needed. In that moment, I'd understood exactly how far I'd fallen. But when I raised my hand to knock again, to beg forgiveness, the sound of her sobs through the woods stole all my courage. Those broken, gasping cries hurt more than any physical blow ever could. Coward, my wolf Ashar sneered at me. The days bled together, each one heavier with regret. Today, her birthday, had been my flimsy excuse to reach out. I stared at my screen, and even though I knew it was no use, I waited. Even a go to hell would have sufficed. It would have given me something, an opening. The chance to say the one thing I hadn't had the decency to say that day, I'm sorry. But the screen stayed dark. Nothing came. Fine then, I didn't deserve an easy way out anyway. I'd berated her physically. It was only right that I apologize physically. The thought of seeing Sarah again made me restless as I got into the car. I didn't even know what I planned to say, if anything at all could reverse those awful, ugly things I'd said. I tried to practice on the drive over, but by the time her house came into view, my mind was still a blank slate. I was about to pull into her driveway when my foot slammed the brake. A familiar Aston Martin was pulling in ahead of me. I watched, tense, as the engine shut off and Lucian fucking Reed stepped out of the driver's side. I gritted my teeth, irrational anger tightening my muscles. The guy was everywhere, like a fly buzzing around Sarah. He walked over to the passenger's side and opened the door with a flourish, bowing slightly. My breath hitched as Sarah exited the car and her musical laughter floated in the night air, a startling contrast to those gut-wrenching sobs I couldn't get out of my head. I heard my wolf, Ashar, murmur, "What do you know? Lucian makes her laugh. You make a cry." I rolled up my window to mute the sound. Sarah's arms were full of flowers, little gifts, and pastries wrapped in bright cellophane. Her cheeks were flushed, and I desperately wanted to blame it on the cold. But it was a warm evening. And that smile she fixed on Lucian, genuine, unguarded, radiant, hit me like a punch to the chest. I hadn't seen her smile like that in, ever. I watched as Lucian stretched his arm out, relieving some of the load in her arms. No wonder she looked so happy. She'd celebrated her birthday. He'd probably done that for her. Something I never once did in the 10 years we were together. They walked side by side to her door, smiling at each other. They formed a nauseatingly lovely picture, and I felt something ugly twist in my gut, jealousy, bitterness, that ever-present regret. "This is good, isn't it?" I heard Ashar whisper. "It's what you want, right?" Ashar was all the best parts of me, powerful, honorable, noble. I doubt he approved of my extremely errant human nature. And as usual, he was right. This was good. It was for the best. Sarah had found someone else. She could finally move on. She deserved to. And it would make it easier for me to commit to Celeste. No lingering complications. No tangled past. So why did it feel like something in my chest was tearing? Why did every fiber of my being revolt at the idea? I was trying to make sense of it when I heard a knock on my window. I flinched, caught off guard. Lucian, A growl built up at the back of my throat as he gestured for roll my window down. I gritted my teeth as he leaned down through the opening, folding his arms on the window ledge. "She had a good birthday today," he said calmly. "She said she can't remember the last time she had a good birthday. Don't ruin that." My jaw clenched and Ashar chafed. Who the hell was Lucian to dictate what I could or couldn't do with Sarah? I felt my hackles rise. I didn't give a fuck that he was an alpha. "Let's have a drink," he said suddenly. I blinked, surprised. There was no smugness in his voice, no challenge, just an offer. I don't know why I said yes. Maybe I wanted to feel like I still had some kind of control. Maybe I wanted to size him up. Or maybe I just didn't want to go home, back to my thoughts. We ended up at Luna Noir again, seated at a private booth at the back, reserved for alphas. The crowd was thin today, the atmosphere subdued in a way that perfectly reflected this unorthodox meeting. I nursed my single malt scotch the same way he did his vodka on the rocks. Neither of us took a single sip, and I suspect it was for the same reason. Neither of us was willing to let our guard down around the other. "You don't like me," Lucian said plainly, leaning back in his seat, surveying me with dark, calculating eyes. I snorted. "No shit." He smirked, but his eyes held no mirth. "I don't like you much either, but I respect what you meant to Sarah." Meant. The tense of that word unsettled something inside me. Without another word, Lucian brought out his phone, tapped on the screen, and pushed it towards me. I looked down at the footage playing, grainy at first, then clearer. Sarah, training, sparring, running drills, practicing strikes. Her form improved with every clip, and the way she moved, focused, determined, it caught me off guard. She looked confident, powerful, nothing like the timid, fragile woman I'd convinced myself she was. "You all made her feel like she was broken," Lucian said quietly. I couldn't tear my gaze away from the woman, the stranger, I was watching. Like she was weak and worthless. You punished her for a mistake she didn't make alone. Something clenched in my chest. "That's none of your business." "Oh, but it is," he said smoothly. "Everything that concerns Sarah is my business now." I stared at him, fury coiling low in my gut. Did this bastard really think he had any claim over her? I hadn't forgotten his declaration, his intent to pursue her. But from what I'd seen, Sarah hadn't fully accepted him yet. Though I wasn't sure how long that would last. I took a sharp swallow of whiskey, letting the burn down my throat smother the violent thoughts rising in me. I had Celeste. Why the hell should I care which man Sarah chose? Get to the point. Lucian leaned forward, his voice dropping. "If you still care about her, Kieran, and I suspect you do, let her go. Stop reopening her wounds just because you don't know what to do with your own guilt." My hand clenched around my glass. I wished he wouldn't talk to me like that, so patronizingly. It made me want to shatter my glass against his temple. More than that, I wished his words didn't make sense. I glanced at the footage that was still playing on Lucian's phone as tension coiled in my body. Everything I'd discovered about Sarah since we got divorced, her successful writing career, the backbone she'd apparently always had, this strength, led to one crushing conclusion. I'd held her back all these years. I was more than her ex-husband and the father of her son, more than a part of her past. I was an anchor that had only ever dragged her down. And now that I was out of her life, she was flourishing. Lucian's pav. I could see it in his shoulders, the way they tensed like drawn wire. Kieran was barely holding himself together. The infamous Alpha of Nightfang, known for power that could shake battlefields, was now one step from breaking my neck in this very room. But I didn't flinch. I couldn't afford to, not with Sarah's future on the line. "I'm not here to provoke you," I said evenly, eyeing the glass he had in a vice-like grip. "But there are truths you need to hear, whether you like them or not. This isn't even about you to begin with." His eyes flared, sharp and wild like a cornered animal. "Careful, Lucian." I nodded once. "For Sarah's sake, I will be." I wasn't rash or brute like Kieran. I knew how to play the long game, and that meant picking my fights wisely. But I won't be silent. I swiped across my phone screen, switching from the training footage to Sarah's performance breakdown. Her metrics were impressive. More than impressive, they were exceptional. She had raw talent, and she was relentless and determined. She took everything I and Maya threw at her, and she came back stronger. No matter how many times she went down, she always got back up. And yet, I knew that this wasn't even her full potential. There was still a burden she carried around, pain and guilt and shame knotted deep inside her, weighing her down, holding her back. A burden given to her by the very people who claimed to be her family. They had clipped her wings before they ever had the chance to spread, dulled her instincts, ruined her self-worth, and punished her for mistakes she should never have borne alone. I would not let them do it again, not on my watch. "She's thriving," I said quietly, not taking my eyes off Kieran, who couldn't take his eyes off the screen. "But she could be so much more. If she's ever going to reach her full potential, you need to stop dragging her back into the muck of your indecision." He bristled, and his eyes snapped to me. "Indecision?" I shrugged. "Even a blind person would see that you're swinging between Sarah and her sister like a pendulum." A muscle flexed in his jaw. "That's none of my business. Yes, you've mentioned." I leaned in. "But as I've also mentioned, anything concerning Sarah is my business." Kieran scoffed, shaking his head like he didn't want to hear it. "You think you know her better than I do? You met her, what, a month ago, 2? And you were married to her for 10 years, and yet I see her more clearly than you ever did," I replied, voice calm but firm. "I don't know the dynamics of your relationship, but if any part of you ever loved her, if any part of you respects her, you'd stop making her relive the same wound over and over again. You'd let her heal." He stood then, jaw clenched. I remained seated. Let him tower over me if that made him feel better. "I don't care who you think you are or what you think you know," he hissed. "But my business with Sarah is—" "And what about Celeste?" I asked. A vertical line formed between his brows. "What about Celeste?" I flicked the display again, this time pulling up the 2-month evaluation from our compound, Celeste's. "It just seems to me like you're focusing on the wrong woman." I let him read the data in silence. Celeste's numbers, despite having equal access to training, gear, and personnel, were abysmally low. She was barely keeping pace with an average Omega recruit. Her form lacked discipline, her drive lacked consistency, and her instincts nearly non-existent. Maybe if you weren't so concerned about her sister, who isn't yours to be concerned with anymore, you would be able to help Celeste. A low growl rolled through him. "That's my future, Luna. Show her some damn respect," he said through gritted teeth. "I'm not here to insult or disrespect her," I said, before he could erupt. "But facts are facts, and numbers don't lie." Celeste and Sarah were evidently not cut from the same cloth. Sarah had what it took to be something great, something formidable. Celeste did not. I tapped my fingers against my glass. "I respect her reality, not your illusion of her. Both women need very different things, and you can't give them that or protect them by standing in the middle, Kieran. Your indecision will end up destroying both of them." He didn't answer right away, but I saw it in his face, the crack in his armor. He was starting to understand that the best thing he could do for Sarah now was to get out of her way. Let OTS train her, guide her, and protect her, while he did the same for the woman he had chosen. He did not get to eat his cake and have it. I wouldn't allow it. After a long pause, he gave a stiff nod, and I saw how much that concession cost him. "Fine," he exhaled. "I will work with Celeste, help her improve, and you." His throat worked, and I imagined the words clawing their way up his esophagus. "You handle Sarah." He leaned down, bracing his hand on the table as he looked me dead in the eye. If I were a lesser being, I would have shrunk under the weight of his menacing glare. "But if I ever find out OTS has any foul intentions toward her, if you even think about hurting her—" "I'll be the first to answer for it," I said without hesitation. "But rest assured, Kieran, I didn't build this place to hurt her. I built it to give people like her a chance, one she was long overdue." He gave me a long, loaded look. Then he left. I watched his powerful strides eat up the distance between our table and the door. Once he was out of sight, I let out a slow breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I finally took a gulp of my drink, letting the familiar burn ease the tension between my shoulders. I hoped I had gotten through to Kieran. I hoped he would stay away from Sarah from now on. He was hurting her, weighing her down, and worst of all, he was confusing her. I couldn't have that. Not right now, not when I was so close. I raised my head as someone slid into Kieran's empty seat, and I arched a brow. "Reese." My beta gave a short, respectful nod. How did it go? He asked. I shrugged. As well as can be expected. He held out his phone to me. It's the lab. I tensed briefly before taking the phone from Reese. I put it to my ear. Alpha, good evening. Report, I said. We secured the DNA, one of the lab aides replied. The sample you provided was adequate. My lips twitched. By sample, he meant Sarah's cake fork I'd swiped when I so graciously helped her with her empty plate. And? Just as you predicted, the results are aligning, though additional samples are necessary for full confirmation. Fine, I said. She sweats all over OTS. Continue discreetly, but under no circumstances is her health to be compromised. Understood? Understood, Alpha. The line went dead. I stared at the dim screen in front of me, a strange sensation coiling in my chest. Something. Hopeful. So have you decided? Reese asked. Or do you want to wait for the final results? I exhaled slowly, ruminating on the question. The results weren't confirmed yet, not officially. But I didn't need paperwork to tell me what I already knew in my soul. Sarah was the one I'd been searching for all this time. Not because fate said so, but because I did. I nodded once. Solemn. Sure, I've decided. Sarah was the one, my long-awaited Luna.